Yeah, I should have done. Can get out easier. Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, 16 years. Longer.
All right. Okay, it's all quiet, but I still want to be able to do this for the first time. So welcome, everyone. So I'm going to call the select board meeting to order on January 31st at 6:03. So this is great to see this crowd. Our first order of business is to hear from our chief, Ryan Newell, about the appointment of Sean McCarthy as lieutenant. So Chief Newell.
Thank you, everybody. And as you can see, obviously made a good decision with choice. I'm here tonight before you to request the board's appointment of Sergeant Sean McCarthy to the position of police lieutenant within the Southborough Police Department. This position became opened up when I was appointed to chief of police for the department back in October of last year. Again, I had let the select board know that I wanted to keep this as an internal process because we had candidates within the department, and Sean moved forward and took on the position. So I'm very happy about that. Sean had also just completed the police chief assessments as well as the lieutenant's assessment back in 2019. So he was fresh out of that process. Sean has worked for the department for over 19 years. He has a bachelor's degree from Roger Williams University and a master's degree from UMass Lowell. He was hired in 2004 as a part-time dispatcher. And then in 2006, he became a reserve officer for the department. And later on in 2006, he was hired as a full-time police officer for the department. And then 2006, he became a full-time police officer. And then 2011, he was chosen to be the next next detective for the department. And he did an outstanding job as our detective for 5 years. And then he was promoted to sergeant in 2016. And Sean has done an awesome job as a sergeant. He has held many specialty positions within the department to include field training officer, firearms instructor, armorer, sexual assault investigator, Worcester County Drug Task Force officer, and criminal intelligence liaison officer. As a sergeant, Sean took on many additional supervisory roles. He became the supervisor of the communications division, the firearms training unit, the assistant accreditation manager, and the internal affairs officer. His most important role was becoming the training coordinator for the entire department. Sean has been an asset for the department in this role, and as we work through police reform and the various state requirements through post. Sean's career achievements, education, and commitment to professionalizing the Southborough Police Department made him a perfect fit for this position, important position within the department. I ask that you please appoint Sean McCarthy to the position of Police Lieutenant within the Southborough Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Andrew.
Good evening, Sergeant, soon to be Lieutenant. This is pretty amazing here to see you got a lot of people standing behind you here, supporting you. And I know I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years serving on the select board, and just really think the world of you. And I think your community involvement is outstanding. And so certainly very happy to support your appointment as lieutenant, and I'm looking forward to, I think we have a great leadership team at the police department. So I'll pass it on to Mr. Stavros.
Thank you. And again, welcome soon to be Lieutenant Murthy. Great choice. Very great to have such a strong internal candidate for this position, and great record. And I, again, strongly support this appointment. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, for coming. It's a pretty exciting day here in Southborough. We've seen a lot of changes within the department that are all extremely positive. And I, as a member of the board, am very proud of the path that we've chosen. We have a phenomenal candidate stepping forward for lieutenant. I couldn't be prouder and I couldn't be happier. So thank you again for all coming in. I can't wait for your pinning. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is the type of meeting where we get excited that the room's packed. So this is for a great reason. And I'm very happy that you're all here to support soon to be Lieutenant McCarthy. As a newer member of the board, almost 3 years, I really had nothing to do with Sean's hiring in the department or his growth in the department. But I think sitting here today, it's extremely important for the residents of the town to know that this is how it should work, that we enable our employees to grow within the department and keep them and want them to be in these leadership positions. So I think we're very fortunate that this is how it's worked, and that under Chief Newell's leadership that it's come to fruition. So congratulations, Sean, and your family and all those people who are here to support you tonight. Thank you.
When we undertook the process to add a new police chief, we had 2 candidates, and Sergeant McCarthy was one of the 2. So the night that the select board made the decision, I had to make the phone call to both gentlemen to let them know what the results of our decision were. I called Lieutenant Newell at that time, our acting chief Newell first, because that was the easier phone call. Then I called Sergeant McCarthy, who happened to be working that night. He was out on patrol. And he said, "You want me to come in?" And I'm sitting in the training room of the public safety building by myself, and it was pretty late and it was kind of eerie. And so I said, "Yes, will you please come in?" And he came in and we had the best conversation. He was the most gracious person I think I've ever talked to in my life. It was such a good conversation. So from that night on, I hope we would end up where we are tonight. I love his family. I love Christina. So I'm so glad that the children get to see what's going to happen tonight. What a great thing to see that their dad's going to have. So I'm just glad we're here, and what a crowd of support. So I agree with whoever said, and it's nice to see a room full of supporters. We had the same thing on Saturday briefly at the public safety building. We had, I think the whole senior center came in to support their budget. So Mr. Mooney, I wish you'd seen that. I know how much you support Council on Aging. So that was great. So we left there with a really good feeling. So now it's carried over to tonight. So we're on a roll here. Okay. All right. With that, anything else, board? Okay. So, Andrew, you want to make the motion?
I move that the select board appoint Sean McCarthy to the position of police lieutenant.
I'll second.
Immediately. A second. All in favor? 5-0. Okay, so congratulations. Yeah.
Sean, I'm going to administer the oath of office. You know, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you, Sean McCarthy, solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties incumbent upon you as Lieutenant of the Southborough Police Department, according to the best of your ability and understanding, agreeably to the rules and regulations of the Police Department, the Constitution, the laws of the United States, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and under rules, regulations, and ordinances or bylaws of your municipal employer made under the authority of the Select Board, so help you God. Congratulations, Lieutenant. Thank you. Good job.
Sean's father, George McCarthy, will be pinning him as the new lieutenant for the Southborough Police Department. Thank you all very much, and thank you all for coming and showing your support. And congratulations to Lieutenant McCarthy.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for the overwhelming support. It's humbling. Thank you very much for being here and for the support, not only in this room, but for my entire career, my entire life. I want to thank Tina, my wife, my kids, my father, George, my sister, Molly, my in-laws, Steve and Marie, and everybody else, and all my friends, everybody that came out that I haven't seen in a long time. I know you're always there. And the department members, thank you very much. It's a very special department, and I wouldn't work anywhere else. I love it here. And thank you to the Southborough community who made me who I am. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to tomorrow.
Congratulations.
So we hope everybody stays for the whole meeting. We'll be done about 11. So it'd be great to everybody here, but assuming that's not going to be the case, we're going to take a 10-minute recess to allow everyone to say hello to Sean and leave in an orderly fashion.
It's just orderly. Very dapper. I think we're about to have a contrast here, but I don't know if he's here to talk about it. Yes. How you doing, sir? I look too young for your voice. Congratulations. Congratulations. Okay. All right, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And good luck. Thanks, and I appreciate you.
We just did a placeholder like we did last year, but I think what's gonna happen is this upcoming year will be indicative of really changing the public works, changing the environment. We rely on them for some of the information. We're gonna see this year where if the fall, we can't make more headway. I think we'll still adopt some of its practices.
Okay.
So we'll still do the stand-up cover, we'll still do the community risk assessment, and we'll still do the strategic plan. I think until we can dedicate all the time, I think there's a lot of areas.
I didn't think about that all. You guys.
All right, so we are going to reconvene at 6:20 PM. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. All right, so we're going to reconvene at 6:20 PM. Okay, first thing on the agenda is public comment. Public comment at this stage is for items not on the agenda tonight. So it's other topics and we will not respond because whatever you're talking about is not on the agenda. We'll do public comment both at the first and the end, and we ask the public comment to be no more than 3 minutes. So is there any public comment that is for an item not on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. No, we're going to go up here tonight. Al, you want to go first? Yep. So introduce yourself.
Al Hamilton. My comment it is on the agenda, but I'd like to go home before 11. Has to do with the so-called license agreement involving St. Mark's Triangle. First thing I want to acknowledge is that I appreciate the efforts for this thankless job. And I know that you are trying to debate resolve the mess. And so my suggestion to you is that the one thing that will pretty much torpedo your proposal is to leave the so-called license agreement in place.
is to leave, is to leave the so-called license agreement in place. If you do that, you're essentially waving a red flag at an angry bull. And at this point, I think we need to lower temperatures, not raise them. Beyond that, it really begs the question of why town meeting should be funding legal budgets that are then used to essentially bypass or undermine the authority of town meeting. And so my strong recommendation to you is that you drop the so-called license agreement. I'd be happy to speak on behalf of the agreement if that wasn't in there, and I'd like to help support moving this adventure to a close. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. So, Mr. Perry, if you're going to talk about the park, you can talk now, or you can talk when we get to
Yeah,
it.
I'm
You
going
got
to
a
talk
choice.
about an item now, which is not on the agenda. I'm going to
Okay,
talk
all right,
later about
fine.
items
Go
on.
ahead.
Okay, I'm David Perry. I live at 22 Main Street, Southborough. I'm a former planning board member and board of selectmen member. I came here on December 20, and I spoke in your 3 minutes about 5 offenses by public officials on this project, St. Mark's Road project. I had 3 minutes to try and I handed out these documents. I'm going to hand them out again. Because your minutes on December 20 are inaccurate. I spoke to the town officials today. Who makes the minutes? It's a lady who gets a recording. And she goes from the recording. She's not present. She looks at the recording, she writes up minutes, and she's given documents handed out at the meeting, 1 to 34 at the end of the minutes. Now, what document is missing? Yes, what I handed out is missing. Who is responsible for that? That gentleman there, the town manager, administrator, is responsible for collecting documents and handing them to the recording secretary. He did not do it. This is a pattern here because he has the same behavior with other people who've come to him for documents and he hasn't handed out the documents. Now I'm going to hand out this one here. I want it in the I want the minutes. I want the minutes changed to record the actual facts of the minutes. And I have handed out a document to you, Madam Chair. You didn't correct. You will read the minutes. And you didn't correct them, did you? You left my document out of the minutes. So in years to come, when people look back and they see an ex-selectman saying that public offenses have occurred, there won't be a record, will there, to look at? Well, now there will be. I'm going to do my damnedest to get the facts of this project out. I'm disgusted at this behavior. And this is just another example. I'm done with that.
Any more public comment? Okay, so moving on. Is Brian here? There he is.
Yes.
There he is. There he is. Okay, so now we're going to continue our discussion on the proposed fiscal year 24 budget. Does everybody have their most recent rev cap? I actually had an outdated one when I got here tonight. It should show a projected year-over-year increase of 5.69%. Okay, close enough for now, right? Okay, Mr. Ballantyne, welcome. So why don't you walk us through what has been done since we met last when select board authorized you to use $500,000 of ARPA to try to offset one-time items to try to get the year-over-year increase on houses down to something that sounds reasonable.
So yes, so we did have that mandate and one of the caveats of it was not to reduce services. So we sort of quickly found out we could get down to 6%, fairly easy. I don't want to say easy, but it was doable with tweaks here and there. And there were changes that happened as we were the last few weeks with the school budgets and other budgets. So there were unexpected things thrown into that have occurred. I've tried to track them in this little log that I have, the changes. Hope I got all of them. But so there was a mix that we did, and then that just happened to be updates and other things of that nature. So anyways, we ended up using 501,800, so we're over 1,800 on your mandate. But obviously, most of that was capital. We tried to target one-time capital. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. We did eliminate a couple things. We eliminated the sidewalk maintenance initially, at least. And we put some other stuff on the Harvard funds, the rifles and the rifle request, I should say. And, put a bunch of, like I said, opera stuff towards the general fund capital. So that was kind of where we laid. We went through some of the operational budgets and found some new things that were relatively small. Some of the things such as youth and family had already been, or were already underway to maybe be adjusted. Obviously, we had the budget summit on Saturday and capital met last night. So I would have had this to you earlier because this version here actually adopts what capital recommended last night. I think it's pretty, to me, it was pretty reasonable and well thought out what they did last night. So
Isn't there one exception to that, though? The sidewalk maintenance, don't they want that to be
Sidewalk maintenance,
100?
Yes, which I was gonna
Okay.
get to, but yes, so they made a bunch of recommendations that sort of put off a couple things that we know that, and by the way, the department head, it was mostly fire, I think. The fire chief is aware of that and supports putting those items off that were put off till next, possibly fall, possibly next Springtown meeting. And we reconfigured a little bit of the ambulance fund, the funding sources to some of the capital based on last night too. So that's important because the ambulance fund was actually over for next year. And the way it got reconfigured last night is now we should be fine. So that was kind of gonna be a problem. But yes, the other sticking point that I'm not sure if the board will support tonight is that they did recommend putting $100,000 back into the sidewalk maintenance, which is reflected in these numbers. The reasoning was that it gives them a start. They felt it was really important to have some stake in the ground to have this sidewalk maintenance project in there. And I can see their point, so I don't disagree. So that number is in there. And the Council on Aging, based on Saturday's discussion, that number's in there with the hours for the outreach coordinator.
You read the tea leaves on that one?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of tea leaves, right? That I've kind of somewhat made executive decisions with, but I think they're reasonable because I think the board was supported, like I said, capital's changes and all that. So it left us basically with a 5.69% increase. This is still a budget in flux a little bit. Obviously, the schools we do not know, including Assabet, which I've tried to get a little more information on that assessment and I haven't been successful yet. So there, and even the operational budgets, there are still possible tweaks, but I don't anticipate anything major. I'd be surprised if there's anything really major. But there are a couple of departments still looking at small line items just to maybe adjust as we move along. I think the chair will be pleased. We've upped local receipts quite a bit.
Oh, I saw that right away. I saw that right away.
We've had a good year for now, and
And Carla's okay with that too?
yes.
Okay, it's
And
mutual.
that incorporates also the 911 fee that we talked about on Saturday. So that's all baked in there too. I think that's pretty much a broad overview. I'm not sure we're in a position to vote everything as solid tonight, but if we wanted to, but I think it's a decent budget, knowing that we still don't know the exact health insurance amount. And like I said, those few things with the schools, and there's some loose ends. Unfortunately, the only unfortunate thing is it does have a lot of one-time money against the budget, so there's really no way around that. I don't know. I think it's going to impact next year to an extent, but I don't know what extent. I know, we've talked about that value issue maybe going away next year, and I agree, it's probably gonna be a much less issue next year. We just don't know this year yet, so, I mean, that's where we ended up. Things are in good shape, I think. You know, if the board wants us to do anything further, we're willing to entertain any ideas.
So let's clarify a couple things to make sure we're all on the same page. So does everybody have this one in front of them? Which shows the changes that were made. He's got 5% or 6% at the top, 5% at the top, 6% at the bottom. Excuse me, 6 at the top, 5 at the bottom. All of those changes are in this. So forget the 5 and 6. He's made every single one of these changes in the ones that are highlighted in yellow. They add up to the million, or excuse me, the 501,800. Everybody got that? Okay, so, and we've got 508 in that bucket. So yeah, we said 500, but we've got 508 in the bucket and we're probably about to have 50,000 more, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is definitely moving in the right direction for sure. Right?
And bear in mind again that 5.67, 5.69, that obviously is the 2%, 2.5% shift. So you're really down to 3.5, somewhere in the low threes. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the total budget going up 2.3%. I mean, what does it do when you got
The greatest. but-
4% salary increases?
Right, I mean, the opera, yes, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm sort of.
I think the issue is that there's a lot of one-time revenue in here. So remember, we had about $1.9 million in free cash. We normally get about 1.3. So the original intent was to put about $690,000 away into stabilization. But that's all gone back into the budget. That 1.9 is not going to reoccur again next year.
But be careful when you say that. We didn't use the 1.9. We're only using 1.6 as far as in the budget. We've used 250 maybe for the park, right? So we only used 1.6 and last year it was 1.6 and the year before 1.4. So we're not too far off as far as what we've
But you're
used.
using it all. You had you had
Yeah.
$220,000 in legal settlement that is disappearing.
Yes.
24, that's going back. My issue is that we need to be very cognizant that, you know, we've likely got a significant hole that we're going to need to fill for fiscal 25 with some of these items. And with using, and I don't disagree with using the ARPA funds on the one-time expenditures, but we've got a big capital bill coming next year too, and we're not going to have that revenue to help us out at that point. So it's just a flashing yellow light at this point, but just wanted to make sure that we understood that, you know, how we're putting this together. It looks good, but you know, we're going to have some potential issues next year possibly. And, you know, Brian wants to color it any more than that.
Okay, well, let's still stay on that because we're trying to avoid that if we can, right? I still think we're okay with free cash because it's $1.6 million, as long as this year we have $1.6 million, right? I'm more focused on capital, which is where we applied the ARPA, and we still got a pretty healthy capital number coming out of the general fund. Agree, Brian?
Yeah, I was just quickly adding it up.
1.3 million.
Yeah.
Where do you get 1.3 million?
More like,
Under the recap right here. The first page. Yeah, so I'm trying to add up and make sure that we're not,
Assume that that's what that means, if it's still in here,
oh, wait a minute,
0.3.
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, okay. So I
no,
had
1.3 includes.
$750,000 for
annual
Breakneck Hill.
Funding too. So that's the gross amount. That's not your general funds.
But does it include the amounts that are proposed to be paid with ARP?
No,
Okay.
No.
So I guess where you were going with that is you don't want too much of a, if that number 1.3 was significantly lower, that would be a really artificial decrease. There should be some smoothing out of it from FY 24 into FY 25, right?
Well, there's something big here we haven't talked about that's been added, which is Breakneck Hill. Okay, so Breakneck Hill is in here for the first time. There's 750, so a big chunk of what we're seeing here is 750 for Breakneck Hill. So where did we get that number? I guess,
I guess.
Yeah, I think,
was the
that-
last number I think we had.
I think that's an estimate number, but we don't think that we're gonna have any impact in FY 24 from that borrowing.
well,
That's
it's
pro-
not a borrowing here.
No, it is.
It is a
That
borrow,
doesn't-
yeah,
That
it is
doesn't,
a
that
borrowing.
number doesn't foot to anything.
Okay, so what's in the 1,327,000? Can we just figure that out? So it's probably the,
Yeah, it's the, yeah. Color. It's the
There's a-
general fund stuff at the top, the
Yep.
fire ambulance fund. It could be.
yeah, but ambulance fund's not going to be in this number. I'm looking at RevCap, page 1. So we've got 1,000,003,
The ambulance is in there, because it's offset by the,
the revenues there. Never mind.
Stuff
Okay, all right,
around
okay.
here. in the, lease. The DPW leases. and transition.
Right, stick with this for a second. Okay, so we've got in here, because this is important, the 348 ties out perfectly, as far as the budget articles. That's not it. So it is the 763, right? At the top. Plus the ambulance fund 160, right? Probably the 55 for the lease debt payments. I just can't get it, Brian, by doing that. But maybe I'm just not adding right.
Oh, and the pocket park, that's your difference. Those pocket.
Because we've got that,
Offset at the end again,
okay,
so it includes that.
so you've got that coming in as other revenue?
Yep.
Okay,
That's weird.
okay, so those two things. All right, so. 'Cause I'm just trying to understand what we have in here net that next year, if we stay close to it, we're not going to have an issue.
Yeah, so you're probably looking at.
So it's 763.
Really, the 763,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
And what do we have for capital for FY 25?
It's probably double that.
I think that's gonna be problematic. The double,
if it stays double, yes.
right?
Well, that would bounce at almost 2 points right there, even if we,
Yeah.
value stabilized and the split stayed the same from this year to next year.
That's probably your biggest issue, I would imagine.
So I don't know what's on the fiscal year 25 capital, if what's major, what is, tentative, but yeah, so that's probably will be our problem for next year if we do this, right?
But capital's been very good. I'll give them credit for, being creative.
Yeah.
And they do uncover certain items that, it turns out we don't need in a certain year, so.
So one that still worries me is Algonquin after what we heard on Saturday. It's not the budget as much as the split goes, so, he's taking, with doing the 12 to 5 and 6%, he's reduced it down to a 3.5% year over year. And Greg did say that they hope to get it down, but that assumes that there's no change in the split either. And based on what he said, I'm just not sure that that's gonna happen.
But, so that's why I take kind of these numbers even with a little bit of a grain of salt, that the 5.67 might really be something a little bit.
I don't see how it goes much lower, I will say that.
And one thing I'm just going with it, but I didn't completely understand it, is how the school, I don't remember whether it's Algonquin or K through 8, but one of the, I think it's the 3.99. K through 8. Was, you get to that 3.99 factoring in eliminating 4 FTEs, but then the goal is to get down to 3.5 without eliminating 4 FTEs. So I don't understand how that's gonna work, but,
Well, they're meeting this week and supposedly what they're going to present is going to get them down. He was shooting between, now this is one place, maybe this will get a little better. He said between 3 and 3.5. So
He did.
Brian's kept it at 3.5.
You did.
So that might help if they really do get it down.
What's that?
Well, I don't know either, but it sounded like this next round that they're going this week is going to bring it down from the 399 to something else. And he's shooting for between 3 and 3.5.
You're definitely working some magic over there.
Excuse me?
They're definitely working some magic over there.
Yeah, no, they were firm. So I just don't see how this goes down much more, without something drastic, unless the schools come through with something they're not expecting. So I think we've got two things to maybe talk about now, because I think we've got maybe one disagreement in this board. I think that Varsity got the same disagreement, which is the Economic Development Coordinator position. And then we should talk about the sidewalk maintenance fund. So let's do that first, 'cause that one's easy, I think. So Carla sent us an email today saying there's already, we've got 47,000 roughly in sidewalk maintenance now from the article from last town meeting where Legacy Farms and the other development. But then, so that's truly maintenance. So we've got to start on this. And I don't think Capital knew that. I forwarded it to Jason after I saw it. So I didn't have a chance to look to see if he replied. So if they're recommending 100, what we might be able to do is, if we agree with that, is do 50 instead of 0 here, but not do 100 because we've got 50 in it already. But doing the 50 is going to increase this. You know, we're going the other way by putting 50 in. Right now, we got 0 in. Right?
That's, well, my version, I put 100 in,
You've got 100?
so we're actually going better. I don't know. Yeah, use
Well, the
percent.
one I've got says you took 200 out and moved it to ARPA. That's part of the ARPA. So you've actually left 200 in the 501. But there's no more one-time stuff to put ARPA against anyway, right?
Not really.
So if you reduce the 200 to 100, right? That would leave us more ARPA money to use for something, but I don't know what we use it against. So Chelsea,
So something else that was brought up on Saturday that I didn't know was what Paul Sabelli said about the shift. He's conservative on the residential,
yeah,
but maybe not on the commercial.
yeah, it's
So-
it's a difference that matters. It
I,
doesn't matter
no,
if
I
it's-
understand, but I'm still worried about the 16. Like, what if we get to the fall and it's 17? I'm like, I thought I was gonna feel really good about the 16 until Saturday.
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that he felt that, we could be in the 12% range
Did.
on the residential side alone, but he wants to go to the 16 because he doesn't know what's going to happen on the commercial
He
side.
thinks commercial's -4.
Right.
So,
spread
so
is
the
still
16, so the 16 is kind of buffering against that change on the commercial side.
I get that.
Okay.
I don't know how he's coming up with the 4. Could it be 5? I don't know.
Of course it could.
So I'm weighing that too, that we could agree to this and be like, I mean, I don't think over 5% is great. I mean, I don't think anybody would. I mean, we've got it down to that, but I think it could be even worse in the fall. So I'm thinking about that too.
I agree that you should think about that.
Yeah.
He said what he said Saturday after talking to Dave Ferris and Bill DePietri, who own a lot of office buildings here. And they've said they've got a lot of vacancies. They got people coming through, but no one's signing leases. And so when they submit their income statement to Paul to value the property, they basically take that income statement, they use a capitalization rate to get to the value. When there's a big hole in that income, that capitalization is going to give a much lower value. Now, I will say this, on 1/1/22, commercial did go up like 2%. So it did go up even in the, the worst year of the pandemic afterwards. But he knows what he's talking about, and he's done this for a long time, and he is concerned about where we are commercially. So you're right, this could get worse. So I just don't think we should assume it's going to get any better than 5.69. And continue to look for every little thing we can. And continue to push, schools to, every bit they can find will be helpful. But the split, we have no control over that. It's totally outside our control at Algonquin.
Can I just add to that, Kathy? So after Saturday, I kind of felt the same way that Chelsea did. I wondered because initially when we did the split, we thought we were safe. And then we came back in the fall and we were off. So that is a concern for me as well. I mean, obviously, we're not going to know till the fall, but I think we need to keep that on our radar as well. That I think what was off 3 points off what we figured it was.
12 to
gonna-
16.
12 to 16, so it was 4. So again, I see where Chelsea's coming from. That was kind of the same thought I had on Saturday. I wondered where we're going, but I don't know how, other than to be conservative with the choices we make tonight and as we go forward, how we really offset that. There's no way to know. There's just no way to know. We've found that out. So.
Sam, any magical solutions here?
No magic solutions, but clearly followed all the conversations here and the other groups as well. I think that we're actually making great progress from where we started the process. And there's always risk involved with all this stuff. So I'm comfortable with where we are. And I think that we just push forward and if something different, bad happens, we'll figure out how to adjust.
Andrew, any other comments?
No, I'm also, I think, pleased to see that the work the finance team did to get it down to the 5.67. I mean, the one question I had in my mind, and I pulled up an older version of our ARPA tracker, but is trying to keep track of with the capital items that are paid for by ARPA that are being shifted from not going to be funded through capital or instead through ARPA, what does that leave left?
Not much in the tax relief bucket,
The tax relief, and what was the tax relief bucket?
508 going into the night.
And that was,
So then
because
take off the
as
508.
pay was taken up from the
Yeah.
300 and then.
Yeah, so we put that in
whatever
there.
We had left there. So is it 508? Okay.
So that's why we picked 500 at the last meeting for,
Oh, so very, very little, very little.
yeah. And now
About
later,
$7,000.
In that
later,
bucket, but there's other buckets.
Ms. Malinowski is going to make a motion to restore 50 to some bucket. And I assume you're going to put it in the tax relief bucket when we get to it. So we'll have 50 by the end of the night in that bucket.
So then I think the point Mr. Purple was making, I think you were maybe making it too, is just that beware that, because for FY 25, that there will be no more ARPA money available to take items off of the capital articles. And so you just have to start to brace yourself for, you want to prepare so that the difference from year to year in capital articles is not too artificially different, right? So it's still at even after taking out the ARPA items, the capital article is still showing the 1.3, and I didn't completely follow the math there, but sounds like some of it is offset by local
yes.
receipts also.
So it's about 700 truly as far as
Yeah.
what we're spending on capital when
700.
you back
Okay,
up
and it
those
was
two things.
859 last year. I mean, I would consider, I know this means the overall tax increase would go up, but then I just feel like it's more honest to take some of these items and just pay for them with a capital.
And leaves more money in the ARPA bucket, the tax bucket.
I'm just concerned about having a number that's kind of artificially low, and then the next year you have a number which is pretty high in relation to that, and then that helps to drive what is the year over year increase for FY 25, is that you just pushed money around and artificially drove down your capital article number. I mean, also, these capital items are things that are, I mean, if you don't pay for them this year, you just kick them off to next year, and
Go ahead.
So I have two thoughts on that. One is, I think the whole crux of ARPA is because of whatever could have happened economically with COVID. Right? So I see this as truly the appropriate use. Because we're dealing with this shift now that is, essentially due to COVID, right? My second thought is, and I'll ask Mr. Stivers again, if we can take the National Grid line item and move that to the FY25 ARPA bucket tax relief. And I would later in the meeting make a motion on my memo that's in the packet to move that to FY25 as well. I mean, I agree with you. We're dealing with, if we use what we want to use this year, which I don't know how you don't, because how can you go above 6%? Like that, like, I don't want to go above 4.
After last year, I mean.
I don't.
One on top of the other.
It's just, unless we're going to start slashing services or going back to, especially the big departments and saying, okay, we really need you to cut X amount from your budget, which I'm okay with going back to them and saying, listen, we want to fund your capital. We don't want to create an issue for next year, but we got to work on the operational budgets then. Like, we got to pick which avenue we're going to go, because we got to bring the hammer down on something. And I don't think kicking capital to next year is going to help us long term, right? And I don't want to create a short-term problem by throwing all the money that we have, but at least if we can plan for what we would have next year and try to use 2 years to offset it, to hopefully get back into normal terms and, look for some compromise in the operational budgets. I don't know. We're going to have to take some hard stance on how we're going to move forward with this, because I am not going to go to town meeting over 6%.
How can we slash operational budgets when it's all salaries and most of them are contractual? I don't think we've got much place to go here as far as operational stuff. So Andrew, I hear you, but I think I'm with Chelsea on this one. That's what the ARPA funds were for, is to mitigate the impact of COVID. And this clearly is COVID related as far as the increase in residential prices compared to what's gone on with commercial. Both of those developers who've been in this business a long time to say, people are, and I see it in my world, everybody's either remote or hybrid, and there's just no, maybe a little bit coming back, but that hybrid work model is here to stay, I think. I don't know, saying what you're seeing, but people are just used to working at home, and that's what they want, and that's what they will take a job for. They ask, they want remote or hybrid.
So Chelsea, just to follow what you were saying, is what you would like to do with the National Grid and then also the Board of Health subsidy to move it to FY25, that you take it, you will not be, no ARPA funds would be used for it. You would be out of the FY25 budget. No?
So what I'm saying is, if we go with what the finance team has proposed, which is exactly what we asked them to do, right? That we have 300,000 in FY25 to use, so that you're using 500,000 this year. And so that next year, when we have double the capital than what we're really paying out of the general fund this year, then we have some. So you're not spending double on your capital next year compared to this year. You're cutting it in half on your net and trying to cushion the blow to FY25. And then in FY26, you're out of money, but at least you gradually built it in.
But we're supposed to be out of money in 26.
Yeah, I know.
Not spend it.
Yeah.
So, to build on what you said, I don't know that we got to vote to move it, Sam, tonight, but I think we got to consider it at some point. We got 704 in sidewalks. I think we all want sidewalks, so I'm not willing to give up that yet. I don't think anybody else is either. And, the Wi-Fi project is going forward. So it may be too much money. Hopefully it is. We can move a little bit up that when they get that project done, but we won't know till it's done. But let's hope next year, first of all, we may not have 4% salary increases, right? There was a reason to do 4 this year, not 3. Maybe that drops back down. If inflation comes back down, which it's at least starting to, maybe we get 3, and that will help our operating budgets a lot to begin with, right? Police was up a lot this year. Hopefully that's going to come down next year. So there's some things that could go, free cash will have a lot to do with this. So if we have a healthy free cash again, and who knows at this point, it's way too early to tell that. I'm hoping that what Carla and Brian have done with local revenue is still conservative, so that keeps going up a little bit, so we don't have to ratchet that back down. So, okay, smile, but
Yeah, Carla says the
know.
ramp is a little more flat than. um,
so as long, Carla, I just hope it goes up, like the budget goes up, 2%. I like to see that, so that, if it doesn't, then, you're throwing more to the tax levy. That's all I'm trying to ever accomplish with that piece of it. So, I think I'm more with Chelsea on this one, Andrew, as far as I think that we should follow what Brian's done here, but we've got to settle the sidewalk fund. He's got 200 still going in the sidewalk fund. Capital said 100. So we can make that 100, and that would keep another 100 in the ARPA tax bucket.
So just to confirm, I'm fine with what you're proposing here because I wouldn't have any principled way. I would just be picking up a couple smaller capital items and then moving them back from ARPA into a capital article, but there would be no rhyme or reason to how you would be doing it. And so I would then I'll just defer to the recommendation here of the finance team.
Lisa?
Kathy, sorry, if I may. So based on the sidewalk article that's out there, I don't know why we wouldn't lower the 100, respecting capital's recommendation. Just like you said originally, just lower that down to 50. It's not a lot of help, but at this point,
I'd put 150 back in the ARPA
yeah,
bucket.
anything that helps,
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to do.
So you agree, Brian? So if we lowered that 200 to 50, right?
Yeah, I think we have different versions, Kathy.
Okay.
Yeah,
If I have
Bri- Brian's
100,
already
I
lowered it
still
to
have
100. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at 200. Okay, so what have you got? So you still have 501 coming out of ARPA? Okay, I added in this added to 501, so there must be another difference in here. Okay, so you've got it at 100, being paid out of ARPA, right?
We have it at, yes, 100. No, 100 is being appropriated.
Okay,
Because you got to be careful if you're going to move it into a maintenance article because of the timing of using ARPA. So it makes sense to come out of the general fund. Right?
Yes,
'Cause you,
that's true.
I mean, assuming it will be done by 26.
Right,
but-
because you have to have that.
we're gonna vote soon. We may not vote on the 500. We're gonna vote on the Board of Health tonight. We're gonna vote on what Jay wants as far as the room, right? That's the two things we're gonna vote on tonight, because we need to make sure we got this number right. So we're not gonna vote, we just think this is where it's going, right? So okay, so I'm not following what you said. If we have the sidewalk maintenance fund, right? Added to it, we've already got 50 in it. If we add 50 to it, but do ARPA funds, you've got the 100 right now
Yep,
coming out of general fund?
yes,
So that would help,
that would help.
okay? That would help. That'd take another 100 off, so I'd take it down a little bit.
At this point, I think every little bit helps because again. I think between now and town meeting, you never know what surprises may come up. Hopefully there's surprises that are going to take it the other way, but we don't know. So.
Yeah, the governor's budget's not going to be done until the very end of February. So
That's actually a
hopefully
good
that's going to give us a little bit. of
Yep,
room.
that's a good
And
point.
maybe that if we don't count that into the revenue bucket, that may alleviate some of the concern in the fall
Right.
if
So-
things don't go
That's
the
a-
way that
yeah.
we think. So that may be your buffer.
Good point, Mark. Very good point. So, because we've kept that flat, so I
Yeah.
forgot about that one. So I'm not sure. So Chelsea, what you said a minute ago doesn't make sense to me. If we were to take the $50,000 for adding to sidewalk fund out of ARPA, we'd vote that immediately or in the next few weeks, and it could be used right away. So. I'm
It
not
could
sure what
be.
your point
I'm
was.
just saying that if you move my concern with moving ARPA money into a maintenance account is that rolls over year to year. And I think you can tell me into a maintenance account.
Ew.
Yeah.
So we can't use ARPA to fund the sidewalk maintenance article. Right, so you just have to spend it. She didn't say we couldn't do it. You just have to spend it. Right, right. So we never put it in. Yeah. So we just,
Carla, can't hear you when you're talking back there. Sorry.
Since.
it never
that-
goes in.
So we just pay it out of the ARPA account, basically.
ARPA.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it now. Yeah, we got it now. Okay, so we can do that. We just gotta make sure it gets spent.
To commingle it with those funds on.
And she's
Now-
watching this. She's watching to make sure that we're gonna meet the spending requirements too. So she's watching this
Watch.
very closely. Okay, so I think.
So you're
that's-
recommending instead of the 100K coming out of general fund, we're gonna allocate 50,000 of ARPA from where?
From the tax relief bucket. We've got. Okay,
Above and beyond the 501?
well, see, again,
So the money you're gonna
Is
put
the
in
50
tonight.
back? Your 50's coming back?
That's, yeah.
so
Yeah.
Brian, I actually looked at this wrong, because I was looking at the wrong 200. So you're right. So we would have it when we put the 50 in from Board of Health.
So that's what I wanted to use for FY 25.
Yes.
The sidewalk committee. thank
But
you for it.
in your 5.67, you have 100,000 coming out of general fund,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Correct.
just take 50.
We've already got 50 we can use, right? That's sitting there.
So it's
in
the
an ARPA.
original idea. Just go
Yeah,
down to
exactly.
50, combine it with the other one and you got your 100.
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, well, that's, so this is different. So don't take it out of ARPA, just reduce the 100 to 50. Okay, and that helps a little bit too. So I'd go for that. Okay,
And then I don't have to take as much out of the parcel 5440. Thanks.
so far, you know.
No.
You know, we're working on you, Sam. We've got to get Natural Good to donate that property.
I've already given once on this.
But we haven't changed it yet. We haven't changed your name. It's still in there.
Oh, 5.59. You're getting.
Okay, every little bit helps. 5.5 million. Okay. All right, so I don't know what else we can talk about as far as budget goes. Anybody else have anything they want to throw out? So I still think the one flying the ointment is the economic coordinator position. So we still, I think we got a 3-2 vote on that one. So, and I think advisory split pretty much that same way too, maybe the other way.
But that's not in here, right?
No, no.
So that, so we just,
And the tree, okay, I'll tell you what else is not in here. So we put the engineering article in, right? That's
Yes.
here.
Yes.
25,
Yes.
right?
25, yes.
Okay, but what's not in here is the tree funding article. So let me tell you what we could do with that one. Remember when we funded the tree removal, we did 100 from the general overlay, right? And then we did 52 from ARPA. It came in 110. So there's an extra 42 sit in ARPA that we still decided to leave there. We could use that to start that fund and not add anything. So we could do it that way, and at least get it started. That'll buy a few trees, right?
Good idea.
Okay.
So Kathy, if I can just add one thing, on the all-terrain vehicle. Is this the appropriate time?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
So I had raised a question at our meeting on Saturday and had asked to be able to discuss this. I spoke to Chief Achilles. I spoke to the Chair of Capitol. I watched the Capitol meeting last night. I'm actually comfortable where it's coming out of ARPA now versus actually, my concern was that the best use of the ambulance fund or even the general fund? So I just want to be clear, I'm comfortable with it coming out of ARPA. If we don't do it this year, it's one of those that are going to come back again next year and you're going to have the same conversation. And I think the chief has laid out a very good case on why this should be in. So I am supportive of this being an ARPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so we're taking 290 of the ambulance fund like we have the last 2 years. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, so I think we've made some progress tonight. Of course, we have no idea what advisory is going to say about any of this and.
One last thing that is important.
Go ahead.
Mark and Carl probably know this. We have to decide on the personnel board stuff, how the configuration of it. Sooner the better, because if we are gonna pull that back into the budgets, we should probably do that in the next week or two. So I just don't want it to be last minute. So I don't know if there's any thought on that.
I
how we
assume
want.
personnel board doesn't care. This is our decision, right? Or advisory decisions. They don't care.
I
right?
think they'd take your direction.
Okay, and we're going to have them in on the 7th too, just so you know. Okay, so you want to explain,
So initially,
What you
we
talked
took
about?
everything, when the grid was in play, we took everything, which was about 70 or 80,000, something like that, and put it off to the side in a warrant article, similar, I keep saying, similar to the CBAs. How we do the CBAs, we approve a warrant article
So-
and then
so-
add it back
so-
into
so
the budget.
back up a little bit further.
Yep.
So the personnel board undertook a paying class study this past,
See, I get way back.
just to understand how you got to where
Yeah,
you're
because
you're
people
getting
listening
to.
aren't gonna know what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
true. I
so
always
the
forget.
board, so the personnel board undertook a paying classification study. They do this every, looking at Miss Hale, 4 years. 4 years, and in order to determine that our positions are properly compensated and that that we remain competitive with our comparable communities. As part of that study, there, the minimums and maximums of the different grades for the positions are adjusted. And positions are reviewed to determine whether they're in the proper grade or whether they need to be reclassified. So there were a number of positions as part of the study that were recommended to be reclassified. And the minimums and maximums were shifted on the grades on the grid. And some positions that were sitting right at the minimum are now outside of the range. They're not even within the pay range for the position. So what Mr. Valentine is talking about is the positions that are now have to be moved inside the range into the minimum of the new range. And also those positions that may have to have been reclassified and moved up a grade. And there's obviously a dollar value with that. And there was some discussion as to whether this should be put into the SAP article. So with the bylaw, and try to put language in there to try to address this in there. Whether or not a separate article should be entertained, similar to how we do the collective bargaining, or whether or not these changes should be put inside the operating budget article. And explained as part of the presentation, because again, the changes in the SAP as a result of the study are going to have to be explained. So during that process, the information and the changes that were reflected in the operating budget would have to be explained, so that if people voted for the changes in the SAP bylaw, they would understand that those things were going to be reflected in the operating budget. So I think, does that give enough color so I think that, what Mr. Valentine's asking for is just to kind of get the board's view on how you'd like to see this presented.
Who wants to go first? Chelsea.
So I thought a lot about this. And I think it would make sense to have in the SAP article, it summarized and explained on what the impact of these changes are. And explain that in the budgets, in the budget book, the increases reflect these changes. So if there's any concern about them, hold it now. And then if it needs to be adjusted, adjust it. And then Brian will have to adjust the budget for the budget article.
Correct.
So you'll actually see the percentage in the actual budgets increase year over year.
All right, that's what I thought you were going, but then what you said in the middle, I wasn't quite sure. So you're saying literally put it in the department budget that it applies to, so people can really see what that department's gonna cost next year, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm for. Sam, Lisa?
That sounds right to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's complicated in some ways, but that I think ties to the department budgets
Yeah.
appropriately. So
Because, there are some at town meeting that just go down the list to see the year over year increases and they hold all the ones that are over whatever they think is more it should be. And if you throw it off to a separate article, whether it's the SAP article or a separate article, then you really aren't showing the true increase in that budget. So I think that, so it sounds like we all think it should go right in the department budget that affected.
But I think it
But the
needs to be
ex-
explained.
But the
during
explanation of it will
SAP
be in the
article. Okay.
presentation for the SAP bylaw.
Okay.
Okay, so we can carry that back to the personnel board.
So
Thank
I
you.
will redo those and obviously you'll see some increases on the department level, even though it's a
Yeah.
wash. But
And you think the number, the 25,000 is the right number?
yes,
Because you said
It-
70 a minute ago.
it's yes,
It's 25, right?
25,000.
Okay. All right.
The 25,000, are you saying the net impact of this?
Is nothing. It's just how we're allocating it.
No, what he's saying, the net impact of raising people up to the men.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or regrading them is $25,000.
That's what I was asking.
Yes.
and that's spread across a variety of departments.
Right,
Would just to hit a couple different line items in the budget,
right.
but these numbers don't yet reflect that.
Right,
No.
not on the.
Well, he's got, no, it does. It's just in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So it's there. There's a separate article for it. If you look at the articles, you're gonna see it.
So there's an
25,
article we're
069, I
gonna
think.
delete, and then we're gonna add it to
Oh.
the individual department.
The amount flows back to.
Moving from one place to the
articles.
other.
I
It's in-
agree with everything that was just said. I think.
Okay.
It gets
There was the discussion at the budget summit about having kind of multiple articles where town meeting has all these options, this, then you can choose to add that. I think that's way too complicated. I think every town meeting goes longer than we expect because the more number of articles you put on the warrant, the more potential delays, unexpected.
This is hard to
Just
explain too.
Put them in the budget.
Mark, you did a great job. So maybe you're going to explain it at town meeting. Okay, so personnel board will be here on the 7th, as far as I know.
We'll make sure that,
Because Mr. Rubenstein is out of town after that for a while, so we got to see him next time. Okay, anything else that we need to?
No, thanks for that guidance, because that was important. So that's good.
Okay.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank you, as always.
Good work on the moving downward in cost here. Thanks.
Okay, moving on. Chair's reports. I have two things. Hopkinton Water update. So Mark, Mr. Butler and I participated in a remote meeting yesterday with our Hopkinton counterparts. I believe things are going forward, as if this is going to happen. I believe we talked about all the terms again, quite a bit as far as what we've outlined. Their town manager, Norman, led most of the discussion. They actually had their town council on here. And he more or less instructed his town council to start drafting the IMA. More to report later, but that's where we ended up yesterday. Okay. I don't think that this is, Mark can disagree. I don't think it's gonna be ready to sign before town meeting, but who knows? So it is going forward under the terms that we have outlined as far as
And that includes the extra million.
So far.
for
so far.
Things that are not directly related.
Yeah. So far. So we explained that the $1 million that we've asked for on top of funding everything as far as changes go, right? So they fund all the changes, was basically 3 projects that were listed on Ms. Gallinga's list of, wish list for projects. They total 860. And we said we just rounded up to $1 million because of inflation. Those numbers are probably stale at this point. So we just said we thought $1 million. So, they understand that.
And no pushback on repaving roads that are disrupted by the construction.
I don't think so, do you? They understood why we wanted the whole thing done and not just half of it. We
Yep.
actually gave them Newton Street as an example of what, we're gonna get the paid, right? But Newton Street is halfway paid right now
I-
because of the water project.
I think that's a big one in terms of public support. So that's important. Thanks.
And we talked about that a lot as far as the disruption to Southville, Parkerville, et cetera. The people who live close to the Oak Hill tank. So I think they got it. Okay.
I think the one issue that we do need to I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
You were waiting. One of the, and I'll be quick, one of the things we do need to understand is if there's a need for easements in this project, so that when we go to town meeting, we make sure that we get everything that we need, whether it's just simply construction easements or permanent easements. So I'll be working with the consultant just to make sure that they take a look at that. We have all that information. We know all of that right away, in time for the article.
So just to remind everybody, the article is to fund the cost of the engineering audit, right? The actual design. And we need to put a number in there not to exceed to be reimbursed by Hopkinton. So it was kind of funny. Norman, the town manager, he wanted to write us a check immediately. So we didn't have to worry about being reimbursed. We said, no, this is how we're putting this in front of the town, this article. So we want to be reimbursed. We want to, and we should be, we are engaging the auditor, right? It's our contract. So it's right that we do that anyway, but he was anxious to get us paid as quickly as possible as far as that one goes.
They were happy to simply give us the money.
Yeah.
So if we're looking for a vehicle for town meeting and we need easements, you have the vehicle. So, but given the fact that we're likely gonna not probably, as Ms. Cook had said, not have all of this wrapped up prior to town meeting. Even if we have all of the terms agreed to, town meeting is in 60 days, is in less than 60 days, right? So it's not going to be a big delay issue if we wait until after town meeting to begin to, to move that forward. So.
So Kathy, do we know when we're going to have an idea of what roads are going to be impacted? I think before there's any discussion at town meeting, that's the one question I keep getting asked all the time, and I'm sure town meeting's going to ask as well.
So we will be prepared to answer that question at town meeting, and I think it's mostly, Southville and Parkerville Road are the main roads that will be disrupted. There's probably more, but those two roads keep being mentioned, so, that's all I can tell you right now because they keep being thrown out there. Okay, so there's that. Then I just wanted to, because it was such a, I thought, productive day on Saturday, mention that we had our budget summit, on Saturday, started at 8:30, ended about 5:30. We saw 14 departments, besides, by the time day was over with. And then, I just had to throw out again, how nice it was to see the senior center show up in mass, took up the whole room, and they just kept filing in.
Sorry. Just had a common question. I don't know if it's related to what you're saying.
So for the audience, they were there because they were supporting the increase in hours in their budget from 32 to 40 for Cindy, who does the outreach for the department. And they just wanted to make sure that we understood where they stood. And we did. So we have added back into the budget that we looked at tonight, those 18 hours.
That was gonna be my question.
It should be 8 hours, sorry.
The 5.6 rev cap includes the additional hours.
It does,
Okay.
it does. So she's got 40 hours now. But I just thought, I'm sure you guys too. It's just so great to see everybody come out on a beautiful Saturday afternoon and support that department. So go senior center. Okay. Come on up. So public comment.
So I saw that on the agenda and I thought it would be of interest to bring my daughter to help her complete her current events project tonight, seeing
Introduce
mentioned.
yourself first. So your daughter.
So my name is John Reed and I live at 34 Bigelow Road, and this is my daughter Colleen, who mentioned to me earlier today that she has a current event project. And I said, there's a lot of actually very interesting current events occurring in the town. And one of them specifically is the water. So I brought my daughter with me to perhaps listen to some of those updates. And so appreciating, I thought it might be another forum when similar to previous meetings when representatives from the town of Hopkinton were here to talk about the progress. And the latest one that I've been able to attend was in August when there was the DPW. I'm gonna mess up the name, but it was perhaps the DPW steering committee or the planning, the DPW planning
PWP.
board.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it was during that meeting when I thought that the engineer representing both Southborough and Hopkinton indicated that this report or some form of a written summary on the progress would be made available. Was that report ever released or made public? Does anyone know?
So lots happened since August. That was a joint meeting with Capital Committee. I think I remember you there.
Right.
So lots happened since then. So we have been working with a gentleman named John Butler, who's a longtime member of the advisory committee, who has done a deep dive in our water department for many years. So he has helped us basically come up with a plan that included terms under which we would be willing to allow the water connection to be here. So that's where we are at this point. So we agreed on those terms. We have given those terms to Hopkinton. Their select board has looked at them. Their select board has basically charged their town manager and town engineer to go forward with us to try to put together an IMA that reflects those terms. So that's where we are now. So we've had at least 2-3 meetings where Mr. Butler was here to present everything that he had studied and researched. And so we're at the point, we're pretty far down the road at this point. And so right now we do believe that it is, I would say at least more likely than not, that we will end up with an IMA to allow the connection.
So has there been any written
documentation that, as a, say, as a taxpayer or a citizen of the community, am I able to, I'm interested in simply reading it and understanding how these options are progressing. Is
So the
anything
written
writing?
documents, besides what Mr. Tees, the town engineer, DPW engineer put together, which you saw that night, Mr. Butler has done a series of presentations, so that's probably what you would want to see.
Yes,
Okay, so we can get you those.
please.
Those are in the minute of the packets for prior select board meetings. So
And you know where else it is?
So,
It's on the DPW website. If you go there, there is a link to everything that's been done with this proposed project, including all those
Okay.
reports. So it's all there.
So I'll admit, I think I might have last looked in September, October, and then stopped looking. So
Yeah,
Uh,
so if
I'll
you
be
if you
sure to
just go
look.
there, you should see everything that has been done.
very good. I appreciate it. And I just want to quickly thank Mr. Denigan. I'm happy every day I drive by the Northborough Road and see the culvert project finished. And I think he was instrumental in doing that. So I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for your effort.
One done, check it off. Okay, so that's it from me. Chelsea.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to give a quick update on the regional dispatch process. So Mark and I have been meeting with representatives from Grafton, Hopkinton, and Westboro. And we did get in touch with our town council as it related to some of the concerns that this board brought forward in the last time we talked about this, related to governance and debt and bonding, assessments, recourse, all of those kind of topics. So we did hear back from town council, who had some a few substantial changes and other, I'll say, flow and wordsmith changes to make it kind of more sound. She actually did the Foxborough IMA. So that was helpful. So she pulled some language from theirs. So we did meet with her for about an hour and a half today so that Mark and I have a really good sense of why she changed, what she changed. And also Attorney Tellerman had some comments as well, which was helpful. And we met with the group this afternoon and prepped them for getting a red line document from us. And town council also so Liz Lyden is the one that did it. She put together a memo that kind of outlined the more substantial changes so that it was at least summarized. And I'm almost done with going through the document and accepting. So I'm going to send 3 versions of the document. One, the complete red line, so you can see every single change that was made. A second version that only includes the substantial changes as red line. So I'm accepting all of the like wordsmithing stuff just so that you can focus on what the substantial changes are, and then a clean version. So the other towns will hopefully be reviewing that either next Tuesday or the following Tuesday. And then I would anticipate that this board will be reviewing it on Tuesday, but I'm hoping to get it out to you tomorrow so that you have time to review it. And I think it would be helpful to know after you review that document if we want to ask Liz if she's available for our meeting next week, unless it's obvious from you or when you read it, the changes. So that's my update.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
I actually have had some thoughts about closing what I think is a substantial loophole there in terms of the protection that each town might have against an assessment that they view as excessive.
Uh-huh.
And I think there's a way actually to deal with that. So I would look forward to seeing that, but I'm going to offer some comments, I think.
Okay.
Given what I see there.
And some of the changes that she made actually reflect the Algonquin setup. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
you're thinking or not.
What I'm going to propose, I think, is not basically quite what Algonquin does.
Okay.
But again, I think you need to have a way to avoid the current language that says basically the new board of directors can assess the towns for whatever they believe is reasonable or necessary for the budget. And I think there's a way to protect that, which I think will be very helpful in terms of getting public support for it. because
Okay.
I
Well, there's statutes that you have to
Yeah.
work within. So
Exactly, yeah. So
I'd be
anyway,
curious to see what you have.
Look forward to seeing that.
Great.
Timing on that, you might want to refresh our memories as
Yeah.
to.
So
plan as
And
to-
so running in a parallel right, is the grant application. So grant application is due with a signed IMA by March 2nd. So the goal is to sign an IMA by February 23rd. So we have next Tuesday to flush through whatever other concerns that we have. And we're on a short timeline to get the other towns to also going on it with us.
So we're probably going to have a special meeting to do this because our next meeting after the 7th is the 28th.
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So I know two ideas that we talked about the last time this came up, and I don't know whether they're in this next version or there's any discussion about it. Was about the idea of having an annual report from the board of directors, and then also, because this is like the constitution of this new RECC. To have an annual report, and that executive director is expected will make themselves available to meet with the select board of each town at least once. You know, if there was any discussion.
Yeah, we didn't put that. I don't think we put that into the IMA, but the annual, I think there is a report in there.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And Ms. Hopkinton, any further along?
Still in process.
All right, Mr. Purple.
So I really don't have anything else to add because all three of the items that you talked about under your reports are all things I've been involved in. That's been dominating my time.
We steal your thunder, don't we?
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda, we've got A, B, C, D, E. Anyone want to hold A? Minutes?
Yes, me.
Okay, B? C?
I'll hold B.
Okay, so we're holding B, C? The donation, D,
Please.
and E, yes. So we're holding everything but C. Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve item C, which is the acceptance of the $9,100 donation from the Friends of Rec to help offset some specific cost for next year.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Yes, that was approved. Okay, who held A? Sam?
I did, yep.
Okay, go ahead.
January 6th, one small change there. Line 32, I would add the same description that we did for the first interviewee to add during which she answered 16 questions, ... because she did there. And I think they ought to be parallel.
Okay,
That's it.
what about the
And
next one?
nothing for the 17th.
Anything else for the 17th?
I had one minor thing. Okay, on line 196. I think there's just a word missing. Should say stated she is in support or was in support. Just right now it says stated she in support.
Yep, is missing. And that's it? Okay, so we got two changes. So, someone want to make a motion
Make some point, please, on this item.
on the minutes?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Request you take a vote right now to amend your minutes of December 20 to make it accurate, please.
Well, it's not on the agenda, so we're not going to do that.
Okay, I'll come on to the next meeting. I want it on the agenda. I'm not getting away with this.
Okay, so I make a motion to approve the January 6th and January 17th minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so the vote is 4-0-1. Okay. All right, next one that was held is B, and Andrew, you held that one?
Sure, so I remember we approved a prior version of this, I believe, what the amendment here, the change here just reflects that the town was not able to reach a access agreement with the abutter. And I mean, I remember each time this comes up, this is already been negotiated, we're under kind of a timeline we have to. But I still wanted to ask some questions, which is we're confident we can meet these deadlines that are in the.
Yes, that was one of the discussions, I think, with the original administrative consent order. So in working, again, this was Liz Lyden out of Jay's office. And Melissa Danza, confident that we can hit those dates.
And then, so there's a language thing that I think it is important, which is on page 2, paragraph F, where it says respondent, which is the town. established, constructed, operated, or maintained a dumping ground at the site and disposed or contractually when it was our the predecessor in interest, the town didn't set up the farm dump, it was
Ray Davis.
Ray Davis. So then, I mean, the next sentence clarifies it. When the town took title to and possession of the site and didn't remove or dispose of the solid waste, we became the entity that became responsible for it. And there's other language later that says, you know, by signing this, you're not admitting to all these facts, you're just agreeing not to contest them. I just wanted to raise whether, and I don't know whether the timing is such there's not time to consider this, but
This is the same agreement you've already signed.
okay.
So,
Yeah,
and I know that the council has worked with DEP's council. So the only thing in here that has changed is that the town is no longer, you know, we tried for about 11 months, almost 12 months of negotiation with the abutter to include them in any potential cleanup process. That has failed. DEP has recognized those efforts. And in order for us to, as you said, make sure that we can live within the timeframes and hit the dates that we're required to, is relieving us of that obligation in this amendment,
Okay,
right? Because if we can't get the LSP, the licensed site professional who works for us, to give us the number that we need to fund the cleanup, we can't then go to town meeting, get the funding in place to do the work, which means we are inherently going to be in violation of our administrative consent order by not being able to do the work in fiscal 24.
Okay, so we sign this tonight or whenever, or approve this, right? Then what's the timeline to go forward? We're really trying to make sure that whatever we need on the warrant is going to be on the warrant?
Correct.
Okay.
So we have a placeholder for this on the warrant. It is gonna, you know, we normally have capital articles, a non-borrowing and a borrowing. And so this will be included in the borrowing article. So we will have that, we've got it all set up. We just need the number.
okay.
Yeah, I was concerned about that language also, Andrew, but my recollection from last time was we don't have a lot of negotiating power on this.
No, I remember that
No,
this was.
You're
triggering
right,
some thoughts
you're
of it.
absolutely
We had a similar discussion
Yeah.
9 months ago and, but if we've already, I mean, I do feel like there's language later in there that says we're not admitting to
Yeah.
these things, even though there's,
Yeah, we've got basis for an argument at least.
yeah,
so.
okay.
So including it in a capital, whether it's debt or not, boy, I almost wish it was a separate article so we could make sure the town knows this is going to get fixed finally. So we can talk about that, but I would prefer not to put it in the capital article. So that's cosmetic, so we can talk about it. Okay, so, Sam, Andrew, you guys are happy? Okay, so our job tonight
Satisfied.
is to approve this document. Everybody agree? Okay. All right, so I'm going to make a motion to approve the latest amended consent order from the DEP regarding the cleanup of Breakneck Hill dump.
Second,
All in favor? Okay, 5-0. All right, that would be so great to get that done finally. Okay, next one that was held, is the EDC coordinator, contract with Claire Reynolds. Lisa?
Thank you. I would just ask the board to delete one of the bullet points for approval. The last bullet point saying research other full-time positions related to an community and economic development coordinator in surrounding towns with the intent of verifying or corroborating the full-time job description sought for Southborough. I don't think that's the consultant's job. I think she's being brought in for 15 hours to help EDC conduct business. You know, we talked a lot about that at the summit, budget summit on Saturday. So I would rather see the 15 hours spent towards that. And I just don't think it's under her purview coming in to assist the EDC with potentially filling that position.
What's your
So,
paragraph number, Lisa?
it's on the front page. It's the last bullet point.
Yeah, there it is.
yeah, I'm willing to give the EDC some rope on that one if they want her to do some of that stuff. Doesn't bother me to have her available to do that potentially. So, I mean, they're not going to go crazy with it, I don't think, but flexibility to me is good.
That also jumped out at me and I would it satisfy you if it just said research other surrounding towns, community and economic development staffing or something like that? Because I think that, so one of the things that was discussed was strategic plan
Mhm.
for EDC. I mean, naturally, as part of that discussion, you can expect there'd be some consideration. What's your long-term plan? You know, what goals do you want to achieve? And then what type of staffing would you need to achieve those goals? I think that it's reasonable to, as part of that, you're thinking about what other surrounding communities, how they operate and staff their own economic development. I mean, committees, but I see the point of what you're saying, that you're concerned with the intent of verifying and or corroborating. You know, I'm fine with taking that out, but
So let me just take it a step further, Andrew. I mean, we talked about on Saturday, Kathy had talked about the businesses in town. I think this person is better served reaching out to businesses and focusing on that than potentially a job description or even filling a position that's kind of EDC's role, is to decide what they want and do research on what they want. I think to pay a consultant to do that, again, we talked about whether the EDC position potentially some felt maybe even needed to be full-time. So why would we waste the 15 hours we have on researching a coordinator position? That's my only concern, Andrew.
I'm going to agree with Lisa that I think she's only got 15 hours and I'd rather focus on trying to keep the businesses here. They were here, and when there's meetings that to be done, to go to those and really pay attention to specific things that are going on, and let the EDC keep worried about the coordinator position. So I'm with Lisa on this one.
I think it's a good point. Lisa, I think that we need somebody. I think it's great that Ms. Reynolds will help us in the interim to get going what has been lacking. And I don't think this should be her focus with even less hours than what Marika was working.
Sounds like we have a 3-2 vote, maybe?
Or 4-1. I mean, it's not worth,
Well, I
not worth arguing
feel,
about, so
I think
let's keep moving. Yeah,
Can't agree on everything.
yeah.
no, I am fine. I think the point you're making, Lisa, is that if someone wanted to do research about how the staffing and other, just have the EDC committee members do that.
Well, this position's been vacant for all this time. There's got to be a bunch of catch-up work to do too. So I just wanted to put, Claire knows this department, right? She knows the committee stuff, so she should be able to jump right in and be pretty effective.
Just one other unrelated question to this. Any procurement issues with this being a personnel board defined position and filling it with a consultant?
No, not in the short term. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, if you're gonna make a permanent change, then
Okay.
obviously we need to look at the structure, but the intention of the contract is between now and June 30.
Okay,
So obviously, if we're in this same position or we haven't defined a different path forward for July 1, then we're gonna have to have a
Okay.
conversation about it.
got it. Thank you.
All right, so it sounds like we are in agreement to remove this paragraph, right? Okay, make a motion to approve the contract to hire Claire Reynolds for 15 hours at $50 an hour as an independent contractor, with the contract in front of us, with the removal of the last bullet point on page 1 that starts with the word research. A second? You're smirking, Sam.
I'll support it. I'm not going to second it.
Okay, all right.
You're not gonna.
I'm not going to second it, but I'll.
Not gonna go that far. Okay, we got a motion second, so all in favor? 5-0. Okay. All right, so Chief Achilles. Come on up. Chief Achilles has asked for approval to increase the ambulance rates for 4 different categories. And that was my problem. I don't know what these categories mean. So I just wanted you to explain what BLS emergency, these guys probably already know this. I don't know it. ALS 1, ALS 2. I assume mileage is just the mileage that the ambulance travels, and boy, that's $38 a mile. Pretty good. So can you just explain what these categories are?
Sure, within context, in December, I sent the board, chair and the town administrator, our request to get, support and approval to revise our ambulance. It's also known as ambulance fee schedule. These are charges that are accepted by insurance providers. And the categories are basic life support emergency, which is the response they do where minimal skills are done. ALS1 emergencies, which are more robust. Skill set, and ALS2, which is of the top, where multiple skills and advanced procedures are provided.
Right?
The ambulance fee schedule was last revised in 2019. And in 2020, it was determined that due to COVID and also 2021 that we revised. We have a billing company that does our billing for us, known as OnStar. They provide on an annual basis what their average bundled rates are for their top 50 providers. So we try to align ourselves with that because it's a good benchmark. Just to know, it's very difficult to poll other ambulance agencies in the departments to get their numbers. So this is just a really solid way to do it. We appreciate the work. Nobody knows.
Is it on now?
Yes.
Hence the green light.
Oh, me. Okay, so that makes perfect sense now. So now I get the rates, and so I see where you got the requested rates from. But there's no assurance that someone's insurance company is going to reimburse at this rate. It just depends on the insurance company, right? So you hope that you've at least got rates above their rates so that you're not leaving money on the table.
Well, each private insurer will reimburse depending on your plan. Medicare reimburses at their fixed schedule, which is not near these. And I want to assure, just like we did last time, is that individuals, their insurance company or Medicare gets billed. This is not out-of-pocket money that they have. And we've been very cognizant of the fact if somebody's having a hardship, that if they supply for an abatement or some hardship, that they're not going to have an out-of-pocket expense.
Okay.
Based on some of the earlier conversations about the ambulance fund, I think this is appropriate. And I think that the rate increase, because we haven't done it over 3 years, is even more appropriate. So,
Okay.
and I'll answer any questions.
Any questions, Sam?
I got a question. So it looks like 5 or 10% bump in rates here roughly. And
It depends.
Yeah, depending on
The
the.
BLS rate was off a little bit. It's about 11%.
Yeah.
But if you did it annually, it's 3. The ALS2 emergency rate is only about a 3% increase over 3 years, so about a 1% increase.
Yeah, so my question is, are we actually leaving money on the table here in the sense that if Comstar sort of sounds like a good benchmark, but do you think that even with this, we are underpricing relative to other communities?
I don't think so, because again, we're not as high as a private ambulance service. And I don't think the public would want those rates, and nor would I recommend them. I think there's some value of being a town department and we've done very well with our revenue. We monitor our collection rate. We're doing a solid work. The members of the department do a great job documenting, so we get what we bill out. So I'm very comfortable with these rates. And I think that there's not money left on the table.
Okay, again, we're not taking out of individuals' pockets from people who
Correct.
can't afford to pay, which is the main thing here. But, if we're underpricing relative to what insurance companies will reimburse, I wouldn't mind being closely aligned with. it.
And,
So if
and you
you're
also have to
comfortable,
realize that
It's fine.
Medicare reimbursable is far less.
Yeah,
So that,
understand. Yeah.
and.
Well,
this
that's
one-
what's important, I would think, is Medicare. It's got to be
Yeah.
primary needs. That's what I was trying to get to is
Yep.
we want to have the rates above what the insurance company's going to pay.
Yep.
And so you can at least get the insurance.
And we're
reimbursed
certainly
100%.
above Medicare on this stuff.
Yes,
So,
yes, and normally you are.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for Chief as far as his proposal? His rates? Okay, so Chelsea, you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move that the board accept the revisions to the fire department's ambulance fees effective you want me to-
Today.
today, immediately, as presented today.
Second.
All in favor? 5-0.
Thank you. We'll let
Thank
the
you, Chief.
insurance company know. I'm sorry, billing
Billing company.
service know, and we'll sign that and forward it on.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, moving on. So our first item under other matters is the first appointment to the newly formed newly approved pilot committee. As everyone probably recalls, at the May 2022 annual town meeting, there was a citizens petition sponsored by Ms. Fiore to create a pilot committee. It went to the state changed some of the language in it, and we got it back, and we're ready to now try to seat people on the committee. There are 4 people that are required to be on it as far as town departments, et cetera, and one of those is select board. You may recall that Ms. Fiore asked for it to be advisory, but advisory can't sit on another committee, so then she changed it at town meeting to be select board. So the only appointment we're going to make tonight, because no one else has stepped up yet, I think that's about to change, so maybe, possibly, is select board. So, that's what we're doing tonight. So I would like to do that if the board pleases, only because I'm the liaison to the schools. So I think it would make sense that I did this too, but I'm certainly happy to listen to anybody else that wants to do it.
I will nominate Ms. Cook as our representative pilot committee.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Okay, so got 1 member. Okay, and then we'll see, as people fill out the forms, we'll start appointing other people and then talk to the other 3 departments that need to.
appoint for a particular term or?
Oh. Yes. we have to
Sorry.
skip that.
I'll nominate Ms. Cook for a term through Mr. Purple,
I believe I believe they're yearly appointments, so it's going to be June 30.
June 30, 2023.
Let's just do it that way for.
Yeah, so it will renew the same time all other appointments
I will
renew.
amend my motion
Okay.
term.
All right. Okay, all in favor of the amended motion through 6/30/20. Okay, thank you. So
Yeah,
that's
and
done.
one other item for the board last night, Capital Improvement Planning Committee nominated Joe Palmer to represent them on the pilot committee.
All right, so we'll
so
do Joe
we-
next.
So we'll do Joe next time. We do have a couple of volunteer applications. We'll see if any other committees give us a name before the 7th.
Who are the other 2? Is Council on Aging is one. Who's the 4th one?
I'd have. to
Because it was
look.
your article.
Yeah.
Who could it be?
Who's the
Rec,
author?
maybe? I don't know who else
No.
could be. Library? All right, that would
I
make
think it
sense.
was-
All right, so
I
we'll
think it was this
figure it
one.
out and get them. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so that one's done. Next 2 are a little bit related, but we're going to talk about them one at a time. So we originally had the next one on as a report from Andrew because he's our representative on the park working group. But there's a lot going on, so I thought we really needed to make this a full sort of discussion. So everybody's on the same page as we march forward to town meeting. Okay, so I thought I would start off with the money piece of it as far as the article goes, and then you take over and explain where you think the working group is.
Sure, I think that the money piece is the larger part of the discussion. So.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement. I think we are, but because we've got an article saying that we want to fund the cost of the park for an amount not to exceed. That's what's intended. But I don't know that we officially voted on it. So if we haven't, we really need to vote on that to make sure we all agree with that article. Because the plan is to have the land swap article first and then this one to come after it with a presentation from the working group, assuming they get to the point they've got a concept that they're ready to present.
Okay, so I thought, do you want to also talk about the money to prepare documents to get the bid and that discussion?
Yeah, we should let everybody know what happened as far as where the working group ended up on that. We allocated $20,000, up to $20,000 from ARPA to allow them to engage VHB to help get to the point they've got documents ready to be put out to bid. They're not going to have that done before town meeting, and many of the committee, I'm not sure everybody, didn't want to spend any money. So 2 meetings ago, they had Greg Russell and Michael, I forget his last name, from VHB on the Zoom. And Greg said they've got enough money, left over from other projects that they are going to do this work with no further charge. So they're going to take, and this is where I want you to do this piece of it. So I just want to stop there, and then you can explain where you are as far as what they're doing. Yeah.
So further work they're gonna do is just a plan or bid documents?
No plan, just a concept, just kind of like what they did the first time with the three drawings. Okay. But I just want to make sure that everybody's is on board with the $250,000. It's in our budget. All right, that's what Brian's been using as far as free cash.
But to be clear, that $250,000 is supporting a warrant article asking town meeting to approve
Up
transfer
to,
from free
up
cash
to,
up to $250,000.
to be funded from free cash.
And that number would include if the land swap article passed, then that number would be inclusive of everything. So not just the cost of construction, but also whatever engineering work is done to prepare documents that inform a bid package that goes out. So the trade-off is when we discussed this before and there was talk of a more accelerated timeframe, one of the benefits was, well, then if both of those articles got approved, then the work could begin.
Yeah, right afterwards.
this
Well,
means
you,
that
you
the
still
work
got
is
planning
done.
board. There's still planning board work to be done, right? Which, you got to appreciate that. They've got things that they've got to do. But we're just not going to get bid documents that fast. It's not going to happen. And so what, I'm trying not to steal your thunder here. I want you to talk about the park, but that night Greg Russell was asked whether what he had seen so far that night, which was a plan by Patty Fiore and Sally Waters, there was one, then one by Freddie Gillespie, and then one that came in, I guess got emailed in during the meeting from Michael Weishan. So he has 3 to work with. He stated this in an email too, that he believes that budget is fine for some form of what he saw. He said there was similarities in the 3 of them. He really thinks he can come up with something that looks like the 3 of them, but they're not, far apart. But he does believe the 250 is plenty to do the light touch park. And the reason the number makes sense, that's why I want to keep honing in and making sure we emphasize, is the E.H. Perkins contract that had the park in there, total park in there. There was a change order done it to take out $240,000 for the park. So that's what they said the park was going to cost. We got a grant for $290. So it seems to make sense that we spend something close to the $290 on the park. That's what we got the money for to begin with, is to build a park. So that's so the number has a reason into it. And that's what Brian is taking out of free cash to use for it. So that's why you'll see the free cash from last year, 250 being subtracted from it, because it's going toward this in that article. But I don't think we've officially voted on this article, so I just want to make sure that we keep.
I think that how the discussion that VHB had at the working group relates to this is that, again, emphasizing, as you said, that the 250 number is a safe number to use.
So I have a question about the money portion and how you're planning on explaining that the reason why we're asking for 250. Right? So I understand it. I don't think I got it the first time around, but the second time around.
That's a
N-
start.
Yeah, no,
If you
I
don't
understand.
then, we don't have to shot it.
But essentially, if you take out the other ads that we did as part of the bid, so forget about those.
Yep.
You added $240,000 back into road money.
We did.
So that's what I think needs to be clear, because at first I was thinking, why don't you just take it out of the road money? But I think because the intent is the park, you don't want to take it out of road money. Is that fair?
I'm trying to, some of the constructive criticism we
Yep.
have received is that we want to know what this park is going to cost. We want a light touch
Yep.
park. We don't want to spend $1 million on the park. And so how else can you explain what it's gonna cost unless you just say, we're gonna spend no more than $250,000, picking up 240, 250.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Whatever it is,
Yep.
right? But 250 is what Brian's got built into the rev cap right now, okay? Because that's what we said use. So I just want to make sure we're all five understand that, so we all five can explain this when asked as far as where this cost is coming from.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just think it's important that whoever explains this article at town meeting explains that it was taken out of the bid. Forget about the other stuff.
I
It
agree.
was taken out of the bid. It went back into roads. And actually, you can even show that it went back into roads,
Yep.
right? So that's why we had more road money when we went out to bid for the
Exactly.
bid we just did,
Yep.
right? And we're good on that. So we're using it towards roads. And I just think it needs to be clear because I think people are gonna see the 240 and be like, well, wait a second. If it's not explained that it was taken out initially and put back into roads. Yeah.
I agree.
So I'm good with your methodology.
And I just wanted to clarify that in terms of the order of articles, that we're all on board that the vote on the land swap would come first, because if the vote on that was negative, then there wouldn't be.
Why bother?
And it would again emphasize that not seeking to spend any money on this unless town meeting agrees to the swap of the land in the first place.
So I've said all I wanted to say. Do you want to say any more about the progress of the working group, where you think things are going?
So moving along slowly, the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 8th. And where I think we might hopefully be headed is again, so there is the offer from VHB that there can be one other, it's a drawing, right? A depiction of the design that's gonna fit the budget parameters that we talked about, but not so detailed that it could form a bid package, so that there just needs to be some discussion among the working group about what message is sent back to VHB about what changes should be made. What are the common elements that should be in that next design? And I mean, the main last two visual things were Miss Fiore's plan, and then also Freddie Gillespie had prepared a plan, which there was a lot of discussion about the last meeting, that, I mean, one of the main changes is that in her plan, there's a rain garden. There's actually a sump put into the I believe, the existing drainage there, so that, you know, if you had a rain garden there, this is something that could help absorb some of the water and also be a design element of the park. So hopefully maybe just two more meetings of one to provide the further instructions to VHB, one to get back the last plan, and then that would happen before a town meeting. But I can't presume anything because this hasn't been there. The next meeting is on February 8th. That's kind of what the agenda is set up to have the direction of the meeting go. Yes, yes.
Can I ask one question, quick question first? And again, this is thinking ahead now. If all goes well at town meeting, is there any thought from this board as far as naming of the park? And if so, just to keep in people's minds, you know, is that something that we would potentially maybe ask? I just don't know that everyone's gonna want to
So-
call it St. Mark's Park
Good,
all the
that's
time.
a good-
So, well, so again, my question is just to think about, you know, would we put a new group together, or could we ask the working group who's put all this time and energy and gotten all this feedback into, you know, coming up with some suggestions?
I think the two most concrete discussions that happened is there was a discussion about Tricentennial Park, and then there was also one Heritage Park. Tricentennial,
Tricentennial, yeah.
the other is heritage.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Let's not get the cart before the horse. I'd rather figure out what's going to happen here and then we can worry about naming.
I'm being positive, Sam.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I'm
optimistic,
just
but-
thinking ahead that, that's our next
Yeah.
thing that we're going to discuss
Okay.
regarding the park.
Yeah.
That's all, just to keep it on radar.
I just wanted to add a little bit on to what Mr. Dunnington was just saying, that I did work with Marguerite a week or so ago and changed up the plan a little bit. And we added in the rain gardens because that was originally on the VHB plan to explain the drainage that was put in. And I also added in, at Marguerite's request, a pathway that went from the middle of the library parking lot where they want to create handicapped accessible parking and created a new walkway along the back of the parking lot up to where that gathering space would be. And she had some interesting ideas about maybe relocating some parts of the story walk or something to that walkway area to get them off of a septic tank. So in the end, I think that the plan that Marguerite currently has from Sally and me is really not very far from Freddie's. The meadow in the middle of downtown Southborough is an entire wild card. And I don't know where that goes from, but Freddie had some additional plantings and we disagreed over like a windscreen for the old burial ground, but otherwise I think they're pretty similar. She wanted another pathway going down to 85. I'm not sure. I don't support that. I'm not sure how the working group feels, but other than that, it's pretty similar.
Thank you.
Hi, Grant Farrington, 58 Flag Road. Just wanted to note that in the charge for the working group that coming up with a new name for the park was part of the revised charge. So I don't believe there'd be a need for another group to do that. I think we had discussed the potential for having another public forum to discuss a name potentially, but we just had kind of an informal discussion on it so far. So thanks.
Replacement completely. Okay, on this park, I think it needs to be said completely plainly. This park is a waste of money. Let me go through several things here. The state did not want the park to be up on this triangle, this remote location. They wanted it on Main Street. That's on the record. I've spoken to Mr. Lorien about this, DEP director. He is mad as hell about what's gone in this town and what he's been told. Lies. It was never intended to be up there. No one goes up there. No one walks up there. It was supposed to be on Main Street where people live and walk and where there is history. If there's a history walk, it can go up there. It doesn't have to start up there. Who is this park going to be used by? None of this has been, you simply decided there's going to be a park because you got a grant. That is not an excuse to build a park because you were given money and then you misspent the money. You misspent it, and Mrs. Cook, you laid into this lady 2 weeks ago, very unfairly. You said this money was not misspent. It was not misappropriated. It was misspent and it was misappropriated. I will go into this one paragraph. That money, very little of that money was spent under the surface of the road, under the surface of the ground for projects to be later finished above the ground. Mr. Lorien was told by this person and by Galligan, he met with that individual and Galligan. These are the people responsible for the lies. Don't you see what's happened here? You're believing the lies. This whole project is based on lies generated by that individual and Galligan, who's quit because she bungled the whole thing and into a disaster, and she's gone for good cause. Now let's see. Lorien now knows the truth. He's man as hell. Yes, he is man as hell. He would like to retract the statement he made in the memo you wrote. It is absolutely true. I spoke to him. You have no right to speak to me. Excuse me. I'm
sir,
on
the
the
only
agenda.
lies that are being told right now are the ones coming from that
Okay.
podium.
Well, we'll have it out. We'll get to the truth,
Okay.
because I've got Mr. Lorion on my side. He's
No, you
mad as
do
hell
not.
at
I've
you.
spoken to Mr. Lorian in the last several weeks. I understand you've been speaking with him.
I
and he
have.
Does not agree with you. He
It's-
still concurs with what has been said at this.
Are you giving him the floor, Chair? Or do I have the floor?
Yes, I will. Mr. Perry, I don't know what has brought you to the point that you're here tonight calling us liars.
I'm
We're
not calling
liars.
you liars. I did not call you liars. I called Gallagher and the town administrator liars,
I take
not you.
exception to that. There's no one that's lied. We have
Oh,
said, Mr.
okay.
Perry, let me finish. You talk and you talk and you talk. Let me finish and please listen. When I was on advisory, when this project came through, I said that I thought that the problem with the project was that we didn't take enough time to look at the use of road fund monies that might have been deployed better elsewhere. But I never said anybody lied because they didn't.
They
There's been
did
no-
lie.
They did not. I don't know where, you came to.
Okay, you're gonna let me
Mr. Perry, you
explain
can
it?
let me finish speaking first. I'm speaking right now. You came to our meeting in November and you said, this was after the public forum for the park, and you said, love it, it's great, they did a great job, but I want you guys to go to Courtable, and I want you to buy that property, tear that house down and make that a park. And then a week later, this starts. I don't know where this came from. I don't know.
I'll tell
who-
you where it came from.
Well, maybe you want to tell me where it came from because it's not true. We have worked diligently to try to salvage a project that clearly was not necessarily done and thought through the way it should have been, but there was no dishonesty. There was no anything about
Yes,
it.
there was.
No, there was not. There was not.
Okay,
Uh,
can I explain how there was?
No, you cannot because
Because
there
you,
was-
say,
I'm
you're
not-
gonna shut me up, are you? This is a democracy, I have a right to speak.
we have let you speak.
No,
have
you
not-
haven't. He butted in. Now you're butting in. I haven't finished speaking. You can't just shut me up like that just because
Mr.
you're
Perry, you're
chair.
calling him a liar. I've seen the emails with Mr. Lorian.
Okay.
You know what Mr.
So
Lorian
why
thinks
don't you
about
let me
this.
explain what the lies are? Because this is the unfortunate fact. You five are honest people, but you have been lied to. You have been lied to. You've bought into the lies. This is the whole problem. That's why you're backing this project. Now listen to me. I'm telling you the truth. I'm trying to save your asses because you have been lied to by Gallagher principally, and then by the town administrator. Number one, the reasons for this project are fake. There is no major flooding up at the existing intersection. I have spoken to VHB Greg Russell today again. He says there's a minor problem up there, which could easily be resolved through one of the other options, which were prepared for Gallagher. I put in
Mr. Perry,
now you're shutting me up again.
I
aren't
am
you?
going to ask you to stop. You're not telling us anything new.
Oh,
You were never involved in this project until recently. Again, I don't know where you're getting your facts, but your facts.
I'm
are just
getting
wrong.
my facts.
No
from
one here has been lied to.
independent people, not you, from VHB Consultants. Now listen, you other members of the board, listen to me. Gallagher lied to you. She's dragged you into this. You're supporting a project built on lies. The park is one example. It was never proposed to be up there by the state, but Gallagher moved it there. There is no major flooding at the existing intersection. It's very easily resolved. VHB actually came up with an option for that. Gallagher rejected it because she wanted a great big $1.1 million scheme instead, unnecessarily. VHB was told to move the road south. Why? Because it would then fit a parking lot for St. Mark's. And I found out today, by the way, today, that who asked for this parking lot? I thought it was Gallagher, but it wasn't. VHB told me it was actually St. Mark's. And St. Mark's denied that to me 2 months ago when I spoke to the business manager. He denied it. Now I know the truth. St. Mark's asked for that parking lot. They requested the road be moved south. That's why the trees were cut, because the road was moved south. Do you see how it's now falling into place?
Okay, Mr. Perry, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm being shut up again.
Well,
I'm gonna write this all up and I'm gonna have it published in my Southborough. And you're going to face the bloody facts here because you have been lied to. I'm trying to save you. Don't you understand? You're not the
Mr. Perry,
problem.
we're trying to
You've been lied
finish
to.
a project that needs to be finished.
Okay,
Okay,
so there
thank
you are. Momentum. You're stuck. You see, you're stuck. You spent $500,000 and now you're going to go to town meeting and say, please, I need another $500,000 to
Okay.
finish something which never should have been started.
Thank you.
It's not justified.
Thank you.
Don't pour good money after bad.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay, so,
rocking up.
we're gonna move on.
You can shut me up and I'm not giving up. I'm going to come back again and again until you listen to me. I'm not the only person who knows the truth. She knows the truth and you shoved her down last week.
You're not giving the truth. I can tell you a number of facts.
Okay, do so.
And right, there probably is nobody that's read more than documentation on this project than I have.
Well, I've spoken to the individuals. I've spoken to Mr. Lorien and spoken to the individuals at BH.
Okay, we're moving on to the,
One very important suggestion. This is a.
Mr. Perry, we need to keep, we are going on to the next.
Suggestion. You know, town meeting is going to be chaos because it's going to be opinion. There's one way to eliminate the opinion. One way, by having an independent civil engineering firm evaluate the existing intersection and the new one and tell us, is our money well spent by spending another $500,000? Or can we actually spend $5,000 up there and keep the old road because there isn't any big problem with it?
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Perry.
the way to
Mr.
come
Perry,
up
we are
with that.
moving on to our next agenda
If you
item.
don't come up with an independent engineer, we will.
Okay, I'm going to start talking about the memorandum of purchase and sale of real estate, which is our next agenda item. And we have with us our esteemed town council, Mr. Tellerman, to help us through this one because it is a legal agreement. So everybody has had a chance to read this. When we met last, we hadn't had a chance to read it, so we didn't discuss it. So since then, I assume that everyone has gone through this and understand what is proposed. Thank you, Jay, for coming up. So I can tell you that there's a few things that need to be changed that are minor cosmetics. We can go through those, but let's start with what I think is the substantive issue, which is the retention of a form of the original license agreement. So you correct me if I say anything wrong, okay? This agreement basically upon signing this, upon execution, would extinguish the original reciprocal license agreement and would replace it with basically paragraph 5 in this agreement, which is another license agreement. Okay. You heard Mr. Hamilton tonight. I think that you've heard from others since this was first made public, that there are those who are trying to be constructive, who believe that retaining any form of that license agreement would be a poison pill for this agreement and would like to see it removed completely. So I think that's our issue tonight, and we want to hear from Mr. Tellerman. I just want to make clear for the record that the select board did not ask for paragraph 5 to be put in here. This was an agreement between Mr. Tellerman and St. Mark's Council. Andrew, feel free to fill in here, but I understand why you put it in here is to protect us. If the land swap does not get approved at town meeting and there's no license agreement, we have no plan B. We have no ability to continue to work on the pile of dirt. So I understand why he would be in here. He's trying to protect us and give us a recourse if it doesn't pass. But there are enough people that think that alone will get a no vote that I think it's worth us talking about tonight as far as whether we want to remove it from this agreement before we execute it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Jay, would you like to respond to that, or would you like us to keep talking? I don't want to say anything. When I look at you, I know. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
That, I think it's on now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure that that's
you stated the facts. I'll back up a little bit and to give, I think I've said this before, probably a couple of years ago when we were looking at licenses, probably for this project when I originally became town council. Municipal law is not particularly well attuned to the purchase or sale or conveyance of real estate and how it works and how a municipality can do work because town meeting's involved. If you were a city form of government, it might be different. But the way town meeting clouds the conveyance of real estate, you have to wait to gain those formal rights. And this happens with projects like this, or more typically with big road projects or other infrastructure projects. Towns live, their stock and trade is licenses. It happens all the time because you can move more quickly. Municipal law states that you do not need a town meeting vote. You can do a revocable license, and it has to be revocable by law to get work done, to have people enter onto your property and for you to enter onto their property. It's a pretty typical device. So here, going back a ways, licenses were done in anticipation of, and that was kind of the method discussed, seemed pretty regular and straightforward to me when we became town council. This process was already started, that licenses were contemplated to get us down the road a little bit while we were moving the project forward and then clean it up with a town meeting vote. And so those licenses, reciprocal licenses, which all look like easements, the only difference, the only distinction is that they're not permanent. They have to be revocable by law. And those provisions are baked in, but they're meant to be placeholders. So those licenses, that reciprocal license agreement, which I put the final language on after I became town council, was agreed to by St. Mark's, and then everything else that happened in between. And we don't have to recount that. As we move forward to this agreement, and we'll skip over all the intervening events, as we move forward to this agreement, Mr. Helwig, the St. Mark's Council, said, well, the original licenses are fine in their form, but they contemplate a different order of events. And we're contemplating now with this land swap, a different order of events. So rather than amend that original license, which we were originally thinking of, because my original draft did not have these license terms in, it was preserving the original license. He said, we should essentially create something new. If you need license terms, and the reason why we need license terms here, or one reason to have license terms here, is so we can work on each other's property. So we can work on each other's property now, and even after the project, the land swap happens. And the latter of which is important because it's not so easy to do work. And if you remember the color-coded exchange of parcels here, they're pretty narrow, small. And if you have to step foot on someone else's property to dig a hole on your property, then these licenses help. We could do cross easements for that too. Same thing really, is meant to be temporary to facilitate the project. In any event, to preserve the status quo prior to the approval prerequisites in this agreement, St. Mark's Council and I said, let's just put in essentially the same license terms, but more modernized to get us here. And let's put in, if this doesn't happen and the parties want to keep doing the project, if the conveyances don't happen, then the license stays in effect and the parties can choose or not choose to complete the project, but at least those permissions are in place. And further, even if the conveyance does happen, to facilitate us working together and perhaps parking a car or doing something else on each other's property. And I think this is in the last section of paragraph 5. Let's make sure that we retain those license agreements for those purposes too. So it was really just a practical device that's used over and over again. I could probably open up my computer and find 150 license agreements that I've done in the last 5 years, and not all for different purposes, but a lot for municipal infrastructure. So That's what was contemplated. Obviously, this has kind of taken on a life of its own in terms of the objections to it. I don't want to be so cavalier as a lawyer to suggest that people shouldn't be concerned about the way a municipal government operates. But this is fairly routine. How that factors into making a policy decision is a decision that the five of you have to make here. If we remove licenses from here, you can do that. It makes it really difficult to do work, the work that's contemplated and future work here. So that's just reality.
It makes it difficult if the land swap is not approved.
It would, right, so correct, and it would make it a little difficult if the land swap was approved unless we baked some easements into that land swap. So you're correct. If the land swap is not approved, then licenses would have to remain in place or should remain in place if there's an aspiration to do that work. If the land swap, and don't forget, the land swap as it's contemplated doesn't happen right after town meeting. It's the actual exchange of property requires a second event as well, which is more in tune to the discontinuance of roads. Now, those puzzle pieces can be moved around a little bit. And it could be accelerated with St. Mark's agreement, whereby that could happen sooner. The discontinuance could be moved forward a little bit, and then there could be some work there. We couldn't accept the new layout of the road until we have a layout of the road, so that's still a future event, but that's not necessarily going to hold up a land swap, so to speak. So,
But if we tonight agree to remove all aspects of the license in here, which is mostly paragraph 5, then we really are left with no recourse. So let's assume it passes. The land swap passes, we take it out, it passes, but we still can't do any work legally on the land that we're going to receive and that they're going to receive until these other pieces of the puzzle fall into place, like the planning board approval, for example. St. Mark's board has already approved this, but of course now would be a different agreement. We'd have to go back to them and have them reapprove. So we still would have a period of time that we wouldn't be able to still go forward until other things that are outlined in here are done, correct?
well, correct. So, and there's a couple pieces that discontinuance does require a town meeting vote. Abandonment doesn't, but discontinuance does. So that would be a future town meeting vote. Although again, we could change the agreement to accelerate the discontinuance. It just means that it wouldn't be a public way. It would still be town owned, but it wouldn't be a public way. So there could still be some means for accessing onto the property, but you would be cutting that off. So that could be accelerated to a certain degree. The planning board approval, and I've had some discussions with planning staff on that. That's really only on the St. Mark's side from my understanding of the planner's interpretation of that. I take that at face value, that by the letter of the zoning bylaws, what St. Mark's wants to do on their side with respect to, say, parking, could require site plan approval, not a special permit. They are Dover protected, Dover Amendment protected, so that process, even though it's still required to take place, it would be fairly perfunctory. So, but again, it takes time. People have to put together plans and apply to the planning board. It's a non-discretionary permit, meaning they can't really deny it. And then you throw the Dover Amendment overlay on that, and it's really very little sense of really kind of municipal discretionary permitting under zoning. So not a significant hurdle. That was put in there by St. Mark's because they wanted to make sure they had that safeguard in case something blew up on the zoning.
It's understandable. The hope was this, that if this were to be approved, the swap approved at town meeting, that we could start work pretty soon to take advantage of the spring weather, not wait till summer or fall town meeting to finish everything else. So it sounds like we may be able to get there if it gets approved. Okay, so here we go. So, Andrew, I'll put you on the spot. What do you want to do with the license agreements that's embedded in here?
Sure. So
Okay,
I've thought a lot about this over the last couple of weeks and I've also talked to Mr. Talaman about it. And maybe I'm just gonna offer some kind of thoughts here about, so like what the value of the license agreement. So it makes sense to me that if there is a positive town meeting vote on the land swap, so that there's then there's a potential gap in time between where there's that town meeting vote and the actual closing where deeds are exchanged, that would make sense where they receive some support from town meeting and that you would want to have a town contractor or agent have the right to be on the St. Mark's parcel, just doing some kind of preparatory work, right? In advance of there being an actual closing. But one thing that has not really made a lot of sense to me is the grant of the license back to St. Mark's, which is on a public way, right? So even under the existing license agreement, we granted to St. Mark's a license to, reading the construct improvements on, do work on, etc., a public way. And I think they have no intention of doing that, of course, because it's a road. So where I'm going with this overall, I like the idea of taking out the license. The provision in here in paragraph 2 that says at the end, provided, however, that such failure, that would be the failure to obtain the approval shall not affect the validity and enforceability of the license terms contained herein. So, I mean, the problem that partly is just kind of a political problem that, unfortunately, license become like a.
It is on.
It is on.
Yeah.
I was talking too far away from the
That's
microphone.
much better.
So what I was saying is, just backing up, having a license between the time where town meeting approved land swap and the actual conveyances of the properties, that would make sense to me. But I do think we should really look into taking out the last part of paragraph 2 that says failure to obtain the town meeting vote approval shall not affect the validity and enforceability of the license terms contained therein. And I was saying part of it is kind of a political problem because all the license really is St. Mark's giving us the right to go onto their property and do things. There's that's something that's just a benefit to the town, but I think people mistrust that they believe that that's because of how things went before, that's akin to committing to doing work on a property where we really have no intention of doing that. So, I mean, if you took out the license agreement, I've thought about what concrete things would the town be giving up, no pun intended, but one would be, there's some infrastructure drainage improvements which have been put in at that site where maybe the town has a long-term interest to, let's say town meeting doesn't approve the land swap. You could see a situation where the town would still want to go onto the land that is owned by St. Mark's and maintain some of the drainage structures that are there, right? That would be a value that the license agreement would give you. But I tend to think that there might be another way of working around that directly with St. Mark's in a situation like that, where the town meeting, if the town meeting didn't approve the land swap and we then wanted to go on and maintain the drainage infrastructure that's on there, so, I know one thing which is very frustrating about this is you have an agreement, it's gone on for months and months between your counterpart at St. Mark's and then if we have changes, we are like, you got to go back to St. Mark's, and does that upset the apple cart here? But what I'd like to think is that if we take out the license agreement, that the portion of the agreement that says failure to obtain a town meeting vote approval means the license is still in effect is we're basically telling St. Mark's, we don't need this license that you're offering for to do work on your property because town meeting will have said, we don't want to do that, right? And that you're not really losing anything either because you've never really had any intent to actually use this license to like go on to St. Mark's Street and start building things because you could never do that until the road had actually been discontinued and moved, right? It would make no sense to have St. Mark's go on and putting improvements on St. Mark's Street unless St. Mark's Street had been reoriented, there was a new St. Mark's Street. So I hope what I've said makes some sense here, but I mean, bottom line is, I think of like, what would be the town be giving up if the, a continued license agreement was taken out? The one thing I can think of is you'd be giving up the right to go onto the St. Mark's land to help maintain the new drainage infrastructure. But if you gave that up, I feel like there's a good enough relationship with St. Mark's that, you know, there would be some, you could deal with that on a situation by situation basis without having a existing reciprocal license agreement.
I think I mean, short of them assuming all the responsibility and liability with your work, what they'd be, that situational kind of ability to do work on their property, there's a word for that, and it's a license. So
It's not reciprocal though.
So I mean,
Okay.
if that was the case, then I might recommend, if the concern is based upon them doing work on what remains a public way until it's a discontinued public way, if that was the concern, then we would change the sequencing. I don't think you'd get rid of a license. You'd say there'd be an understanding that that work won't be done until there's a discontinuance of that public way.
Yeah, yep. No, that's something you could do.
So, and that, I know that that's been a discussion in a conversation that I had with Ms. Malinowski. We talked about moving up perhaps in the schedule rather than next year, perhaps doing a discontinuance. There's nothing preventing us from doing it now. Just means that there's no through road there while people are doing work. We could then change the construction sequencing in the rest of the license terms with St. Mark's. I mean, because the road wouldn't exist anymore, so we could do that work immediately. If you didn't do that and you saved that for later, the discontinuance for later, then we could have some kind of agreement to like, provided, however, that no work shall be done in a public way until it's discontinued. Okay, easy enough
Okay.
to do. I ultimately am going to defer to a policy decision that this board makes in terms of what kind of agreement you think is out there, and because it's your call, and like you said, a lot of this is political for good or ill. That is perhaps what it is. If there's no existing license, even if it was just a one-way license, then essentially work stops. Because there's no means to do it.
But I think the whole intent of what we're trying to do is that work doesn't go forward unless there's a positive town meeting vote. And
Right.
so I guess the issue
Well,
is,
but that's a policy question that you all would have to vote on and then deal with the ramifications and the grant and everything else like that. That's fine. That's again, a policy question that you can have. If town meeting isn't in favor of doing this land swap, then you can kill the project right now. No, there's no need, there's
so,
no
but I think
requirement
the
that you go
basic
forward.
question that why people are, oh my God.
I just have a question on what you're saying. I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. If we take out section 5, doesn't the old license still stay in place? So I'm kind of.
You'd have to take out all of the terminate, right? If you take out all the,
So-
we'd have to change a lot of terms.
Right, so that's why I'm confused. If we're still talking about,
Well,
Sorry,
To
sorry. Okay,
clarify
let me start all over.
what-
I just wanted to be clear, that's all, that if we take this out, and we're talking about what we could or couldn't do, isn't the old license still in effect until we rescind that?
So
Okay, I just want to be clear on that.
I thought.
Either party could revoke it. Those licenses remain in place. If town, if, for example, for example, let's say for whatever reason, snowstorm of the century, town meeting doesn't happen. The licenses remain in existence and the project could proceed however you see fit. There's no legal requirement right now that a town meeting vote has to occur in order for the project to move forward. So it's just, so the license does until either St. Mark's or the town revokes it, that license exists right now. And so if we don't revoke it, then that license still exists until one party, until we revoke it.
So to be clear, paragraph 2, 3, 4, you take out the last sentence. You would, I think, delete 5, except maybe leave the first sentence, which is where I think Lisa's going. Because if she's saying if you get rid of paragraph 5, you get rid of the sentence that says that the previous executed reciprocal license shall terminate. And so you leave that sentence. I just gotta say again, we've come a long way to try to get this resolved. And I still think that this license agreement, the revised license agreement that's in the MOU is a poison pill. Now, I don't know how many votes it is. I don't know, but I've heard from enough people whose opinion I respect and who really think through things and who want to see this project finished and are trying to be constructive, who said, this is a no-go for me. And I just don't know if that's going to be, what makes it not get 2/3 or not. So that's why, I know we run the risk if we take it out completely that we don't get the vote, it fails, and we don't have a plan B. We say to St. Mark's, well, here you go, St. Mark's, we've got a road that we've put in your property. We've got a mound of dirt in your property. We put some pipes in your property and so.
I believe there's some responsibilities under the existing license I'd have to go back to. We'd have to incur the cost and expense of
Putting it back or trying to.
restoring the property to its original state.
And
And
we
and
be-
obviously you have to deal with the grant too.
Yeah, so we believe that that option, which some people have said, just undo it, would be more costly than what we're proposing to finish the park. And we end up with a park, in a piece of land that's twice as big, that's contiguous with our library land. So it just still seems like the by far better idea is to finish this park.
Can I offer a comment?
Yep, go ahead.
I try to sort of step back from it. I've talked to a number of people about this as well over the past months, and I heard the message from town meeting loud and clear. And for me, the fundamental issue is town meeting wants to be in control of the process and have the decision about, where we go now. And I think that it seems to me that removing the license language is what I'm hearing, certainly. Also, though, to Mr. Talman's point, I think that if town meeting does vote for the land swap, then I think there is value in retaining the license terms to start moving forward with the process in a reasonable way, given the things that need to happen as next steps here. So for me, it's not removing all of the license language, but it's making it clear if the town meeting vote is not for the land swap, then in fact, we're back to square one. And we got to deal with the issues about, removing the infrastructure that's been built, et
Well,
cetera. potentially.
to be clear, and I'm not suggesting that this is a particularly palatable alternative. To the extent that town meeting chose not to wrap their hands around the swap. We had no recourse because the licenses were then terminated.
Yeah.
And again, I know this is not likely to happen. I mean, there could be a passage of time even, and then it could happen.
Yeah.
New licenses could be established if there was overwhelming support otherwise amongst folks that across the spectrum to do that. No one is suggesting that as an alternative, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up on the project altogether. You could. And
We could,
at
yeah.
any given point in time, this board could give up on the project and a future board could agree with them, or the future board could revive the project as they see fit.
I understand, but again, my message that I'm getting is that we need to give town meeting the ability to say stop or go. And I think removing, basically terminating the existing license and then making any new license contingent on a positive vote from town meeting on the land swap.
Only to get us to the
Only-
point that the deeds are followed and we can
That's
work
right.
on it.
That's
So
right.
that's to me a nuance that I makes sense if we really think we can explain it. Because Jay, one of the things that we've heard many times is that some people perceived the license as an end around town meeting. Even though it wasn't true, we know why the license was done to try to get the project going. It wasn't intended to be an end around, but that's how it's being perceived. And that's why this thing is such a poison pill. So if you do what Sam said, which is have the license only effective if the swap is approved, so
Right.
that we can keep working between town meeting and the time the deeds actually are recorded,
Right.
that makes a lot of sense.
That
So that you
still
don't just
gives-
have to stop and wait a few more months until it's summer and then it's not a good time to do the part.
And that gives town meeting control over go or no go. And I
Yep.
think, at
So
least
I-
that's what I'm hearing. is
I could predict
people
the
want.
only thing there. So again, if original license terminates under first, in the first instance, and all licenses terminate if town meeting doesn't approve it. If I'm St. Mark's, the thing that I insist on in that instance is that some kind of license remain in place and the town be obligated, as they are currently, to restore the property at their own cost and expense and liability. So if they'd be crazy not to agree to that, or not to insist on that. So you couldn't get rid of it. You could have it fixed, but you would have to bind yourself in that instance to, again, a measure of work that in and of itself is costly. And obviously then you have to deal with the fallout with the grants and everything else, where there might have to be money repaid or whatever money is money. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's our option at this point. That to me is I guess, more practical solution and more responsive to what I think I heard at town meeting and afterward. It is pretty ugly in a variety of ways to have to do that, but we can't simply walk away from it. I think you're correct. We can't say town meeting votes no, therefore all licenses evaporate and we walk away. Can't do that, I don't think. At least without St. Mark's at least getting upset and at worst suing us to remove all the stuff we've done there and restore the property. So that to me is the logical step forward, and it gives town meeting what they've asked for, which is control over the process.
I mean, your options exist across a pretty wide spectrum here. It is, whether folks would consider that practical or not, or political or not is again, it's a policy question for the five of you.
Yeah.
Well, just also that what you're anticipating St. Mark's next move would be, that is, but it's not necessarily, we don't.
You're a lawyer, Andrew.
All right, well,
I mean, I'm not trying to be flip, please. I apologize if it comes off like that, but they're represented by competent counsel and we've made a mess of their property.
And they've got fiduciary responsibility to their board and their organization. So, yeah, they can't be expected to sit by and say, you walk away, don't have to do anything. At least I wouldn't if I were in their shoes.
I think we have to anticipate, because if we're having a frank discussion on what ifs, we
Yep,
have to
okay.
anticipate that as a what if.
I follow that.
Yeah.
But I do think that they also have an interest in working with the Southborough Select Board on having a language in this agreement that's gonna be most likely to succeed in a town meeting vote too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't speak for those are private discussions by their board, who knows where their interest lies. I mean, I don't think that they want the project done. I don't think they have a
Yes.
burning desire one way or the other. They'd like to see the project done, is my assumption. What they think about this local legislative process is probably irrelevant.
Mhm. But it seems to me the next step is to put together an updated agreement
that's what the board
that
likes.
does what we're talking about here. And seeing if St. Mark's is amenable to this update.
And do we all five agree that that updated agreement would continue to get rid of the old license agreement, which this already did, and and keep the license in here that would only be effective if the land swap is approved, does to give us a right to continue to use the property between the town meeting vote and the time the deed's recorded, other than we also have to have a way to, if the land swap doesn't get approved, we've got to have a way to go back and undo everything.
Do whatever St. Mark's
Yeah.
needs to undo it. And I think the contingencies are still in there, are they not, Jay, in terms of the planning board and St. Mark's board and there were three
Well,
contingencies there.
if there's a project, that contingency remains.
Right, if
If there's not a project, then
there's
there's obviously no planning board approval
Right,
required.
but if the town meeting vote is positive, then the contingencies
They're still there.
remain. And there is some amended license language that allows the town to continue to do the next phase. of
Probably
work.
all the terms that are in there currently.
Yeah,
Would,
yeah.
would remain, yeah.
But if the town meeting vote is not positive, then all of it evaporates and we've got to do some restorative work.
We've got to have a way to do that restorative work.
Yeah.
Chelsea, anything?
So what's the timing between town meeting vote and filing a deed?
Soon as we certify the vote. Well, I mean, again, it's a two-parter, so it's based on a couple of different approvals, right? That those are defined terms in the agreement. It's not just town meeting vote.
Right.
So it's on the completion of all those items. It's defined as the approvals, I believe.
Yes, the planning board thinks they also are going to do major site plan approval on our piece, Lisa.
Yes,
Okay, so we do have. major
I'm not sure that's required, but that's, if they do, they do.
They believe it's required. I will say that, so. they believe it's
I'm not sure if they do. I think they spoke about the St. Mark's piece. I'm not sure if that applies to the town's piece, but again, if, whatever they require, provided that it's actually accurate. So
Lisa and I met with the planning board chair and the town planner, and they clearly said, they would distinguish him, minor and major, 2,000.
2,000 square feet.
Way over that. So they do think that they are going to do major site plan approval. They also, we're going to have a hearing about the trees and the wall that was taken down, but we'll get that done before town meeting, and we should be okay with that one. And then they have to write a report, but we've given them all the information for that report. So we've done everything we can to satisfy what the planning board believes their role is in this.
You're missing out on the point.
No.
Okay. Very important.
We're talking to Mr. Tellerman right now, Mr. Perry. We're not taking public comment right now.
So does this have anything to do with the timing of when you would be able to decommission the road? Does that play into the deed filing too?
So there are three contingencies in here: town
Yeah.
meeting vote, the discontinuance, and the planning board contingency.
Okay,
So we could move, there's no reason why we couldn't discontinue. I think the hope was that we would kind of build out the new road and keep the old one kind of open or at least available until such time as the new one was ready, and then kind of discontinue and accept at the same time.
yeah,
You could discontinue now in this town meeting in the vote. There's no problem with that. It just means there'd be a dead end there for a little bit, which again, you could reroute traffic. It's not
yeah.
the end of the world. That's certainly possible. And that was a discussion we had. If
Yeah.
that would help accelerate this, I really, it's a distinction without a difference. I doubt St. Mark's would particularly object to that, while they're obviously always concerned about access.
Mhm.
That doesn't seem necessarily like a principal part of their everyday
Right.
access. So for the short period of time that it is discontinued and unavailable for public use,
Yeah.
then I think that was something we can live in. It might help the schedule.
Because if
So,
we didn't do it then, we'd have to wait to a
Another-
special town meeting to do
Right.
it.
well,
Oh.
discontinuance is a town meeting act.
Or is there a way to ask town meeting for a discontinuance upon doesn't the board accept the public way in advance of town meeting accepting it, Mark? The layout. So is there a way to do it that the discontinuance, ask town meeting to discontinue?
No,
No,
so I
okay.
looked at that question. That is a good question. Discontinuance is effective upon a vote. Acceptance, on the other hand, is contingent upon the actual transfer of property. So acceptance happens, you might already own the property, so it would be effective immediately, or it would be effective no more than 120 days following town meeting. And during that period, there would have to be some kind of transfer. Discontinuance is effective upon the actual discontinuance. I wasn't able to find any support for a contingent discontinuance.
So I was trying to think of a way that we could have a land swap presented to town meeting and not have to have any sort of license. Which is why Jay and I talked about voting at this town meeting to discontinue the road, dead ending it where historical comes out onto St. Mark's, and have that be cut off only while the new road is getting constructed, because you need to get the land from St. Mark's to be able to complete the new road, right? The old road has to be discontinued in order to give St. Mark's that piece of the land, but you can't give it to them until it's discontinued. So those were kind of my thoughts, but I'm along the same lines of getting rid of the license. That's the same. I'm hearing that consistently as well.
I just have a follow-up point, question. So I'm looking back at the reciprocal interim license agreement that's in effect now. So to your point about, you're saying that even if town meeting didn't approve the land swap, that as part of winding things up, that St. Mark's would have a legal right to insist that the town has to remove any improvements that the town put in there. I'm looking here at the license agreement, and I'm not seeing.
There's not it's not restorative in that, because there was a contemplation of a town meeting vote. I'm suggesting that they're not going, where is as is. If we end this relationship, that was built upon an expectation that it would be that town meeting vote was essentially going to be routine. I think that was everyone's expectation. And the fact that it has been anything but routine, I don't know. I'm happy to suggest that we just walk away. If I'm St. Mark's, I think we have to prepare ourselves for the eventuality that they're going to say, well, what are you going to do about this property?
Yeah. Okay.
Or
I'm just saying
we're
that
reserving all of our rights with respect to what you did on the property.
All right. I'm just pointing out, I don't think I see that reservation of rights by the school in the license agreement. It says, the closest I found is that the town, its agents and employees are responsible to maintain, repair any park or road improvements that it installs on the property. So while that's the closest.
No, there's liability that would flow from that, then I would be concerned about a little bit, because we didn't do anything except make a mess of their property so far.
Yeah.
And if we walk away, the state is going to want some money back. Presumably, as well.
That's part of this math on this.
Yep.
So not only do you have to spend the money to, in good conscience, restore it, I mean, and then you give back the 290. So yeah, I think if you just are trying to do whatever has to be done, the least expensively, you still go forward and you finish the park, because it does seem like you get a park out of it and you spend less money.
Can I ask one other question? I'm stuck on this discontinuance. So under section 2, town meeting contingency. It says both parties agree the proposed conveyance of the land described herein are contingent upon A, approval of town meeting vote, and B, discontinuance of the portion of St. Mark Street encumbering town property. So if it isn't discontinued until a latter town meeting, how can we convey property that hasn't met the two contingencies? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
We can't convey
Okay.
until it's discontinued under this current agreement.
So does that mean that the deed then is delayed until,
Yes.
Right.
okay,
Three events.
three
Planning
events?
board.
Okay, just wanted to be,
Discontinuance, town meeting.
so
Yeah.
potentially, if town meeting agrees to this, and I know I'm repeating kind of what's been
Okay.
said, but I just want to walk through it again, so I'm 100% clear. Town meeting votes. If there is no limited license or anything in place, we can't do anything realistically until the deed is done and the road is discontinued.
Right, and the only reason we didn't mention acceptance in there is because I don't think they care as much about acceptance on their side. We have to do the discontinuance so that they can do what they want to do on their particular property. But I think it was anticipated, and we can change the order of that discontinuance and acceptance would happen at the same time, that it would be in one fell swoop, that there'd be those two particular actions at the same time. Again, we could discontinue now.
So that may be,
And it might even make some more sense to do it that way. So, and then accept later. It just, again, it creates a little bit of a dead end there. So.
So Mark, that leads me to one other question then. How, do we have any idea how soon or what the time frame is for Perkins to come in? Because if they have us scheduled for June or July, I would hate for the road to be closed for months until the actual paving takes place on the new road. Do we have any idea at all?
So I think the easy answer is the path forward needs to be defined first. So, if you recall, Perkins has this project that contains multi-locations, right? And I believe the intention is for them to come back and to try to finish all the work that they have left remaining on the contract. So
at one time.
at one time. So I think that they need, so once they come in and mobilize, they're able to finish everything. So I really think that they need to have a clear path forward as to, as of this date, you're going to have, all green lights for you to come back and do all of this work. So now let us know when, because that's going to be the first question. When can you come back? What can I do when I come back? So.
So remember, this is important. So it's really, that's a great question, Lisa, because Perkins was going to walk away from the park, remember? And then Karen came to us the night that she resigned and said, oh, they've changed their mind because they're not going to finish with the other part. So they can now finish the park. But she did say spring. So I will tell you that. I don't know what she's defining as spring, but she did say spring. So if we could also accelerate the discontinuance of St. Mark's at this town meeting by putting that on there, I think we've got two choices. One is more risky than the other, but it probably is going to get you more votes, which is truly just to get rid of the license completely, old and new. So, but if we can discontinue the road, all I think we're waiting for at that point, the town meeting approves it. We're waiting for planning board to do their thing, right? And so hopefully we can help push that along, right? Do whatever, whatever needs to be done with that. And maybe we could get to it really fast. The money's going to be available to be used right away. So that's one way. That one runs a risk that if it doesn't pass, we really don't have a great plan B. Then the one that has a fallback is what Andrew just talked about, which is keeping enough of a license here so that we could continue to work as soon as town meeting vote took place and it was positive, we can still continue to work until we actually get the deed done. But if we could get the deed done pretty fast after that, maybe we don't need that license for that period.
And I think it's definitely something for the board to consider. I mean, if it makes no sense to go back to town meeting for a discontinuance. My only concern is Northborough Road. And no matter how long it's closed, people aren't going to be happy. But I think it's a valid path forward to do this, to move things along quicker, but it's contingent upon Perkins. But again,
Well, we can talk to
Yeah.
Perkins between, we got a meeting next week. We can talk to Perkins over the week and see truly what their schedule looks like. So we can get that answer as far as when they would like to come back.
But I think the real issue, again, for me, is giving town meeting the ability to say go or don't go. And if they say go, then it would seem to me that it makes sense to bundle whatever we need to do to allow us to go. If they say don't go, then we got another problem that I don't have a perfect answer to.
Yep.
But I think I'm prepared to listen to whatever town meeting says with that.
Yeah, Bonnie Faniff, I saw her at one of the working groups. She said, you got to put the road on here. And I said, okay. So she said, you got to put your road on here at the same time. So she actually thinks it should be here. She was select board all those years. So, maybe we take the next few days, really think about this and then try to make a decision, next week.
Well,
But I think we all may seem to agree we should put the, discontinuance on the road on this warrant.
I'm ready to bundle them. And
I think
put it
that
on the
makes
warrant.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's quite practical. I think the St. Mark's should be willing to accept the fact that we're gonna have some short-term inconvenience in order to perhaps accelerate the project.
And Jay, can you just explain how you would dead end the road, like what the process would be outside of the discontinuance? Because you're not gonna,
If
you're
we-
not
If
gonna,
we didn't have a discontinuance, the select board could take a vote under a different section of chapter 82, section 32A to abandon the obligation to maintain it.
so we would have to do that for the section that would be from where the historical building comes out to the new road. Because that would still be a public way.
Or a little farther down there because there's St. Mark's driveway that they've got to have access to there.
Or,
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
the alternative there would be to change some project sequencing so that it could stay open for the entire duration and we would change some licensing terms and make sure that this work is going forward now and that work isn't going forward until the new road's done. But there's a whole bunch of ways to do that. But yes, you could do something short of discontinuing it, but protecting you from a liability perspective. So that statute exists
Okay,
to have, to relieve a town of liability because a road becomes impassable or because there's some kind of temporary disturbance in some way, shape or form, or permanent disturbance.
Some construction disturbance or
Thank you.
whatever.
We use section 32A somewhat frequently, not only for when projects are going on, because sometimes someone says, by the way, did you know that's a public way dating back to the last century, and someone's gonna fall and hurt themselves in there, or a car's gonna get damaged in there. So we scramble and we don't have any intention whatsoever with respect to that public way to bring it back up, because no one cares about it except kids that are out there playing on it. So we sometimes abandon them while still maintaining the kind of public aspect.
Yeah. So again, that seems to me to be logical to give town meeting the choice. And if they say go, then it seems to me it's fair to expect that they would approve whatever we need to do.
Right. In
sooner.
other words, if they say go, let's accelerate everything we can so we can start working on it immediately.
And that includes some of the license language, so we can start work on those things.
I don't even know that you need to do.
Now, so I
One
way
way
to
to
do
do
is
is
to
to do
get rid
that.
of the license completely. As long as we know we can start, we don't have to worry about a 5-month time lag,
Yeah.
right? So as long as we know we've got a way to discontinue the road at this town meeting, right? So that the only lag, it seems to me to be when Perkins can start and when planning board, if they do, right now, we think they've got to do major site plan approval.
But that, for the road, for the actual new road?
No, the park.
Okay, so, but this is,
They can
but
start that
that's,
right now.
that's separate from this discussion, unless I'm wrong. In this MOU, we're talking about acquiring the
You're right,
land.
you're right. You're
Okay.
right, You're right. The planning board contingency is only on the St. Mark's side.
That's
Okay,
right.
all right.
Which is just parking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what you were explaining is it's, I don't know what the right word is, but simpler than full site plan review.
Well, So yeah, in a number of elements, whether you call it major or minor site plan review, is just a different set of regs, but because they're an educational institution, the only thing they literally can look at is parking. All of the other elements for an educational institution just don't apply. Now, St. Mark's has always worked well with the planning board by going above and beyond the minimum requirements of the Dover Amendment. I expect they would do that here if that requirement was out there, but it's not like it could be like an 8-month hearing because there's literally one issue that they're permitted to look at under law.
Okay, but let's be clear. Let's be clear. The school needs to get their planning board approval before this is effective. So they do have to get their planning board, anything that they have to do, what you described, they've got to get that done too before the actual closing takes place.
Unless in the interest of expediting, they would be willing to forego that. I mean, again, I would view with all due respect to, I do a lot of Dover Amendment work, and with all due respect to the good work of the Southborough Planning Board, it's really kind of a no-brainer at the end of the day. So if they decided like, let's get the land swap done and then we'll get this perfunctory site plan review, it's really just a trading of parking spaces for them, and it's not a major review element to it, then perhaps they would be willing to expedite along those lines and avoid that and just do that on the back end. If, on the other hand, they wanted to maintain that, it was their insertion after all, then so be it, yeah. And maybe we could commit them to a schedule to getting that done, file for it within no more than 30 days or 60 days following the approval of town meeting.
30 sounds good to me. Okay. Not
So
yet.
if, and I don't think you have to even make a decision to have me do some work here, because we're happy to do the work. We're gonna change the MOU, the agreement to terminate the license if this thing doesn't happen, with the exception of whatever cleanup work we have to do. We're gonna accelerate discontinuance. We're gonna put a kind of a time period by which they should at least apply for that site plan review. And otherwise, just kind of keep everything else in play, right?
I think that
Does that sound
sounds.
right, Andrew? Is that-
Yep.
Yeah,
I think we-
yep.
Sounds right to me.
So I can put that together and we'll just share it internally, obviously, and then if it looks good, the next time you all get together, then it looks good. And I don't have to share it with St. Mark's, or I can kind of get them in the loop. It's obviously a public meeting, so they're gonna know this happened. If you all want, I can work with Todd so he's prepared.
Yes, please
I
do.
think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give a heads up.
I mean, if this was executive session, I would say no, it's not. So we may as well, and that Mark can contact his folks over at St. Mark's too, and we can kind of put the squeeze on a little bit.
Absolutely.
And one last thought, Kathy, if I may. I just want to thank you again for putting all the time and energy that you did into this MOU, and these comments are no reflection on the work that you did. I
No, I
mean,
don't think they are either. Don't, believe me.
well, no, I just publicly want to thank you for the time and energy you put in to meet with St. Mark's and to try to find a solution, to bring this forward. So that's all.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, can I speak now? You finished that item? I can speak on it?
You can speak if you want to talk about the MOU specifically.
do.
That's our agenda.
do.
So if you've got comments on the MOU. and
Yes, I
not
do.
just Blasting us for.
Okay, I do, because this is not the fault of a consultant attorney who's trying to do a very good job, and he's caught in a jam because it's a political issue, isn't it? And you now realize it. You're now finally taking positive steps to eliminate some of the blocks, but you're not going to succeed. This trivializing of the planning board's role is really abominable. The planning board is a very significant board. Under chapter 41, section 81I, discontinuance of a road, the state law actually gives them the power to investigate. It uses the word investigation. It literally uses the word investigation. The planning board fully intends to investigate the history of this effort to discontinue a
Mr. Perry,
historic road.
please, you used to sit at this table. I don't know why you.
Well,
acting the way
why are you butting in? Why can't I speak?
Kathy, if, could I just speak on the 81I part? just
Yes.
In
Yes.
the interest of expediency, as
Yes.
I said, noted in an email, I think that you and I had earlier today. The planning board has a advisory only role, not a binding role under section 81I, in that it's 45 days. My recommendation would be that if you have any interest whatsoever in putting this on the warrant, given when town meeting is scheduled for, which is just a little more than 45 days from now, you give them that notice now
Okay.
on the discontinuance. Their recommendations are not binding, but they are helpful. Again, the planning board thinks a lot about this. Karina and Mimi have actually reached out to suggest that I meet with them to discuss some of the legal elements of that. We have forestalled that until this board has a path forward. At that time, I'm happy to meet with them. Most of their issues are more bricks and mortar than legal.
They're not bricks
But
and
I
mortar at
think
all.
that, for the most part, I think it's important that this board send that notice now so that it doesn't delay town meeting. They could use all 45 days. They never have to give a recommendation if they don't want to, or they could give a recommendation shorter. But if you give them that opportunity now, in the off chance or the likely chance that you do have discontinuance in that warrant article, then you're covered there regardless of the end result of that planning board process.
So, Mr. Helmer, are you admitting that the word investigation actually exists in the law, state law, Mass General Laws, section 41, chapter 41, section 81I? It does exist, doesn't it? You admit that? Do you?
I'm not particularly keen on being cross-examined.
Well, have you not read it? Your town council.
So
Mr. Perry, the agenda item is to discuss the proposed MOU. If
This
you want to
is,
discuss-
this is on the MOU, excuse me. The
Okay.
discontinuance of the road lies under the power of the planning board. Why don't you read section, you're the town council, for God's
it
sake.
actually does not rely on the planning board at all. The planning board has been given an advisory role only. They can investigate whatever they.
Okay,
like.
they can
But
investigate.
it is not in any way a barrier or binding. If they recommended 5-0 to either recommend discontinuance or not recommend discontinuance, it would not be binding on this board or town meeting. It's similar to their recommendations with respect to zoning bylaws. They cannot bind the legislative assembly or this board to putting something before the legislative assembly. I'm glad that we have those checks and balances with the planning board and in those two instances and other instances, but it remains purely advisory and it is an important box to check, but which is why I suggest that we stay on that time frame. But it doesn't affect your vote ultimately.
Okay, so we actually do have an
And I
admission
did,
and the
excuse me,
word
Mr.
does
Perry, I'm
exist.
talking.
Well,
And
I
did-
had the floor and he
No,
butted
you
in
don't
on
have the
me.
floor. You've had the floor 3 times tonight, and so.
I insist on being able, this is a democracy, for God's sake. You can't just shut people up. You can't shut people up. They have a right to speak. We've got a Supreme Court case about this coming up, haven't we?
Mr. Perry, we are on the agenda.
I
item
am
of the
talking
MOU.
about the agenda item. He has just admitted, more or less, that the word investigation actually exists in state law. Do not trivialize the planning board's authority here. They can kill this project dead. Dead.
Okay,
The
thank you
planning
very
board
much.
can kill it. Don't trivialize their role, for heaven's sake. And why, I'm going to ask one final thing. Why the hell don't you ask St. Mark's to spend some money and finish their own bloody parking lot? Why the heck are we spending town tax money on building a parking lot for a multi-million-dollar private school, for heaven's sake? None of this is discussed. You're washing over it. You're going to town meeting for $500,000 to spend on a parking lot for St. Mark's School? Are you serious?
Okay, we have another person that would
It's a
like to speak.
joke.
Ms. Fiore.
My head's spinning a little bit. I have a couple questions. about
Okay.
this. Are you proposing to leave in the new license agreement in the MOU with the change that it is only effective if passed at town meeting, if that article is passed at town meeting to do the land swap? Or are you saying to take out all of section 5 and any reference to that license?
The former.
Well, we've talked about both, so I wouldn't say the form. We've talked
Yeah,
about both.
I was confused on how.
Yeah, so we talked about both. And given that we may be able to accelerate the time so that we could start work in a reasonable time after town meeting, making sure that we are on the EH Perkins schedule where you need to be to, so we don't lose them. Got a good growing season. We may be willing, when we come back next week, to get rid of all reference to lesson. That's one choice. The other choice was to leave it there only to do what you just said. So both things are things we talked about tonight. So you're,
But you haven't decided, you haven't.
no, we're not going to vote
not
tonight.
leaning
We're going
one
to think
way or the
about it.
other.
We're going to wait a few more days and think about it.
So, Mr. Tallman, you said that in regard to if the land swap fails at town meeting, St. Mark's will want some kind of retribution on that property.
I certainly wouldn't use the term retro.
No, that's not the right word. They would want restoration. Is
Well,
that a better word?
I think it's a highly visible property. I think the town would want to make sure that there's some restoration of
Which
the
I
property.
totally get.
Yeah.
So the issue is that you then suggested a license agreement would protect the town or protect St. Mark's, whomever, and provide that end result.
So yes and no, and I'm not trying to be obsequious with this. What I suggested was even if everything else fails at town meeting, which means the majority of the license terms goes away, we'd leave a remnant piece there that would allow us to do restorative work on that site to bring it back to essentially what it was prior to the disturbance, but nothing more, nothing less, not for completion of the work, just to essentially get that back into its proper grade and basic.
And
landscape.
why can't that be part of number 2 on the MOU? That, which says, wait, sorry, go back to it. It says that this needs to pass at town meeting. And if it doesn't, we need to restore the property.
So I don't really care. I'm not trying to, again, it doesn't matter to me where it is.
It matters.
It could be another paragraph, regardless if we retain that permission, which in all legal terminology would be a license. We could put it in paragraph 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't matter to me, wherever it flows the best. It's a remnant that I think would probably stay in there. I don't really care where we put it. So it could go to 2, it could be a new 5, it could be a new paragraph at the end.
I'm not an attorney, and I don't think the majority of people that are residents of this town and pay taxes are attorneys either. I think I would be more comfortable if in item 2, there was some kind of disqualifier that should this not pass a town meeting, it is the obligation of the town to restore the property.
So that's up to St. Mark's. What I would like to, and I'm not going to volunteer that, nor am I going to negotiate a license agreement here in this room. What I would like to do is retain the right to restore, and whatever we work out with St. Mark's in terms of what they'd like to see for restoration there on a property that is belonging to them would be subject to further discussions on a scope of work, because it would have to be paid for. And I don't think I would want to commit in this agreement, and St. Mark's may ask us to commit to exactly what that looks like. I just want to retain the right to do that. How that happens and what those obligations are is subject to further negotiation with them.
So
Oh, and-
I don't believe you were town council last spring at that town meeting.
I
Is that-
Yes, you
You
were.
were? Okay. It wasn't pretty.
I
And-
do not disagree with you.
And I think on my perspective, and I think in this, I probably represent a number of people that voted against that. The issue was that it was a license. The issue was that there was a license in place that town meeting had nothing to do with. This was a project that took off with no knowledge of residents. It was kind of rammed through in more ways than one. And the license protected that. And the real problem that we had, or I had, I don't tend to speak for everybody else, was that there was a member of the select board that said, I believe it was on that town meeting floor, should you not approve the easements, it doesn't matter essentially because we still have the license agreements. That is going to ring true in everybody's ears if you continue to have a license agreement. Well, they're just going to be hearing Mr. Healy standing on the floor last year saying, it's not going to matter because we still have a license agreement. It's a problem.
That's a position to take. There's not a legal statement in there or a legal question, so I'm not gonna, there's no need for me to respond to it.
Okay.
So,
Another question is, you had if the land swap fails, then how does the town maintain the understructure that has been created to help with the library drainage and stuff? Instead of, again, another license agreement, couldn't there be an easement that is just granted to the town by St. Mark's, that should there need to be work done on that understructure or maintenance, that St. Mark's grants an easement to the town to do that work?
there's some easements that can be done without the benefit of town meeting. It's not clear to me that that would be one of them.
But again,
I would
to
have to
keep
think
the-
about that. Some drainage easements can be accomplished without town meeting. But it's unclear to me without knowing a little bit more about that one, whether it could be done in that way. I would have to look at it.
But again, it would be a way to keep the word license agreement out of it by creating an easement. I'm just,
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, they're equivalent, but I understand the stigma.
But the town meeting still has the right, Ms. Fiore, to actually stop the project. I think that was the point. So if
Oh.
town meeting says we're okay with going forward with it by approving the land swap, then there are other things that need to happen or make it much more convenient to go forward in a way that saves the town money in terms of getting the contractor to do the job for the
no,
for the price, et cetera.
I totally.
And part of that go forward involves a license, but it's a very different license than what we have in place now, which is much broader and not under control of town meeting. which
Well,
is
that's if you keep that in versus taking out all reference to a license agreement and, you know, as Ms. Cook said,
But
going
we
in.
can't
with no
do the work.
plan B.
Yeah, we can't, if town meeting says go forward with a land swap, we really can't do the work that we need to do without the license to do the kind of things that need to happen before the actual deeds are conveyed and so on and
But
so forth.
we just discussed that's not.
So we just speed up that
terribly long
process.
period
That's
of
the way you just speed it up. We do everything we can to speed up every
Yeah.
aspect of that.
I don't know what the best solution is. I think this project is a mess. I think everybody agrees it's a mess. It's a mess visually when you drive by it. It's a mess because of the involvement with the state and the grant and the lack of consideration to the people of the town in the planning of it. But I also don't think we can turn back the clock. We can't start over. We can't do away with the work that's already been done and pay to undo it. I think we have to compromise and move on from there. Put in place something that's going to make sure this kind of a project doesn't get ramped up in the future the way this did. But just start from where we are and move forward and solve the problem is what I would like to see done. But I would like to see it done in the most friendly way to the respect, or the most respectful way to the taxpayers. I have one other question regarding this. Could you just please confirm to me that in this MOU where it says that the land, I I don't know what section it was. Hold on. Number 12. If you could just confirm for me that when this says the town and the school each acknowledge that they have inspected the town property and the school property as the case may be, and that they are satisfied with the results of the inspection, blah, 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 the property, town property and the school property, as the case may be, in as is condition with all faults as of the date of this agreement. The way I read that section, it says to me that when this agreement is signed, the MOU is signed between St. Mark's and the town. That is the date of the as-is condition. And then moving forward, any responsibility for the park, the road, all of that falls upon the town. And I want to also confirm that no money will be spent to remove an old road or to enable the construction of whatever St. Mark's deems to use with their property. i.e., when we give them the land, when we switch the land, we are no longer going to spend one single penny on engineering, on design, on construction, on removing a road, on grading, on graveling, none of it. Can we confirm that?
I'm not in on I don't have any knowledge of the particular expenditures and who's responsible for which particular items. That's not something that I've worked on. How that construction sequencing is working, that's part of the grant and the scope of work. It's not an issue that's covered in the MOU.
But
That's a separate part of the project overall.
But in at least 3 or 4 locations in this MOU, it says that upon the land swap, St. Mark's is responsible for construction, maintenance, et cetera, of the property. That says to me, the town is not going to do it. And I just want that confirmation from you as a board that we are not going to spend tax dollars on this. As you know, from the very beginning, my real problem with this project was that the intent was to spend tax dollars and town money, granted money from the state, whatever, on private property. Yes, a land swap is going to certainly appease that issue, which by law, you cannot spend town money on private property.
Not true, but we can have that conversation later.
But I thought it said this, I thought that this is in here, that everybody takes their land and
Takes
they
their own land,
do their thing to it. It is in
just
here.
want verbal confirmation that that is true, because that is the way I am reading this document. And as I said, I think there's 3 or 4 instances where it essentially says that, but I'm not an attorney, so I don't know whether I'm reading it properly. So I'm just looking for confirmation that once the land swap is completed, the town will spend 0 money on that property,
Meaning that property, meaning the
on
St. Mark's.
St. Mark's
Yeah.
new
land that
property.
St. Mark's would be acquiring.
Correct.
So if you look in paragraph 2, it basically says that it ends by saying set improvements to include the construction of a parking area and completion of landscape improvements. Andrew, you're an attorney. Read second paragraph.
Second
Whereas-
paragraph.
Yes, the
Yes.
second paragraph,
Whereas
whereas
school
the school,
desires.
yes,
Read that.
correct.
I read that the same way.
Yes, I
I'm
just.
curious if someone reads it differently.
I want confirmation from you all that Lisa and I are correct in the way that we're understanding that.
Well, that's what I think it says in here. That's what I think.
I'm looking at it right now.
Why would the town spend money on?
They're not going to. They're not going to.
So-
It's the point, I think.
The only thing I'm unsure of and the reason why there's hesitancy, certainly post swap, everyone's responsible for their own property. What I don't know is whether or not there's any of the work that would be done prior to the swap that has been contemplated whether that included things that benefited both parties in terms of grading or otherwise. So I can't sit here and say there are three essential project areas on this, on the plan. The first is the land we're getting from St. Mark's, which includes the relocated road in the park. The second is the town land, the right of way that we're would be giving to them. And the third is that little triangle in between, which is their current property. We're not doing work on their current property. As I understand it, there's no work that's entirely their own, is my understanding. I just don't want to misstep and say that there hasn't been work that's benefited both parties that the town has undertaken. I think it's pretty clear that it's contemplated that they do work on their property that they come to own, and we do work on our property that's in the agreement. I just don't know until that time happens, or with respect to the work that's happened so far, if any of the money that we've appropriated, to Sam's point, has gone into a public purpose that might have incidental benefit for both parties. So that's what my only hesitancy there. I have no quarrel noting that the parties' agreement contemplates finished work on their own property.
Yeah.
There's
And for
just, there's just could be gray area in these kinds of mixed construction projects. That's all. That was the only reason for my hesitancy.
If there had to be grading as part of the Perkins project to make the stormwater work properly on our property there, I think that I would be comfortable with.
Yeah, the
doing
anti-aid
something like
amendment
that.
contemplates sometimes work that spills over both lines. So it's if we wanted to clarify that, we could to draw a more fine line. My guess is that there's some small elements of construction that might benefit both properties that we're undertaking because it ultimately fulfills the town's purpose of making a better road with better drainage and gets us to a park. But I can't sit here without being a contractor and give a full understanding of that.
So we need to confirm this, but it's my understanding that the drainage work is done. Right? It's done.
The substructure.
And what
done.
Ms. Fury's talking about is originally there was discussion about we were going to give St. Mark's a gravelled parking lot. That's
And remove the road.
and remove the road, right? And so that is off the table. I mean, to me, I thought
Is
this is what took care of that. And so we should clarify that. Because I think that is what this says, that we don't intend to spend another dime on the property that they are swapping for.
So could we ask Mr. Purple to get with the contractor to identify the work that is left to be done on the blue section of the proposal and incorporate it into, I don't know if it goes into this agreement or just, there needs to be some understanding of that.
Right, so I think it's important just to make sure that St. Mark's has the same understanding as what this board's understanding is under the conditions of the MOU.
I mean, let's be, a simple perusal of the plan shows the two areas touching each other. So certainly the preparatory work that we're doing to get a new roadway, there's going to be some small overlap. This is more of a Venn
That's not
diagram.
what she's talking about.
No, I understand. I'm just, I just don't want to draw too bright a line while we're commencing with the work there. So there needs to be an understanding of it. If,
Okay.
we have to be careful not to put too fine a point on it.
So we can get that clarified? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Okay, thank you, Jay. I think we've done all we can do tonight.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's an interesting one.
Nice to see you in person.
There's a word for it.
A lot of moving parts.
Okay, next thing is ARPA funds. So I think we've got two things to vote on tonight. Ms. Melanowski, you want to describe the Board of Health one?
Sure. So in your packet is a memo that I distributed after the Board of Health took a position to release the earmark of $50,000 that was for FY '24 to supplement the health director's salary. Through conversations with the health director and the staff in the department, there were multiple factors that went into this. But essentially the current status of the department is that, we're moving out of the COVID world or more into the stable state of living with COVID. And the board and the department staff, including the health director, felt that we could move her number of hours down for FY '24. So we are returning the earmark. Definitely appreciate this board's support of earmarking it and using prior year funds to get us through a difficult time for our residents. So we hope that this is a positive story here on returning some funds.
Okay, so the number in the ARPA spreadsheet is 51,825. Okay,
You can have all of it.
all right. Every little bit helps. Okay, so I will make a motion to move the 51,825 that's been earmarked for Board of Health for the director for fiscal year 24, zero that out and move it to the bucket that we call general property tax relief for residents.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, 5-0. Okay, the second one is one that Jay Montijo has requested that would allow us to have a second room in the training room of the public safety building that would be wired similar to this one and not have to use the OWL system. So it'd be another good place to have meetings that we should be able to do a really good, solid sounding hybrid meeting. It's $30,000. So you've got the memo in your packet as far as his request goes. He requested it specifically to come out of the Wi-Fi upgrade bucket, which we've got 240,000 still left in. We've always designated 10,000 to start doing the survey. We've got 240 left in it. I guess he feels like he's got plenty of money in that for that one. The other bucket, which is under his jurisdiction, is the website upgrade, and there's only 28 left in that. And so he didn't want to take that just in case there's some overage as far as that goes. Right now, we don't need it, but he doesn't know how it's going to end up. So he preferred to come out of the 240,000 Wi-Fi upgrade bucket.
Yep, I think that's an important function there. For,
Yeah.
again, transparency and public involvement. So
Yeah.
money well spent.
Anybody have any issue?
No, I mean, I assume it's gonna be easy to use, right? So that someone who you won't need.
Probably depends on the user, but that's what the goal is, right? He says so.
Okay, the idea, you won't need to call Jay or Hassan.
That's what he's hoping.
Start
That's what he's hoping. That's what we're trying to get to.
Call,
You've had,
call
I've
Terry.
dealt with that a lot, and we don't, I don't want to bother him anymore.
Just a general comment. Can we just get an updated spreadsheet
Yeah.
on where we're at? I also think as we're going through this process, so, he has X amount. We don't think we're going to spend it all. Like, I think I know Carla's on top of it, but it's at some point we need to add up what we have left and add it to FY '25 offset.
Yep.
Okay.
So I update this as soon as we leave here. So I keep it and then I send it to Melanie, I send it to Carla. And then Carla is watching to make sure we get it spent. It's
Yeah.
one thing to approve it. It's got to get spent.
Right.
So I think we're in good shape, but yes, I will update it and send that out
Thank
to
you.
everybody. Okay, so the motion is to approve the funds requested by Jay Montijo to basically outfit the training room in the public safety building with the same type of system we have here for $30,000. Using
Second.
ARPA money, wait, I gotta finish, using ARPA money, using the bucket for Wi-Fi
Second,
upgrades.
second.
Okay, all right. Okay, all in favor? Okay, great. Okay, Miss Braccio gets to leave early tonight.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
And Ms. Braccio is leaving again because we're about to talk about the DPW superintendent replacement process. Bye, Lisa. Okay, so the public may not know where we stand. We had identified a candidate, Mr. Phil McNulty from the town of Stoughton Water Department, and had extended a offer to him. We were in the middle of negotiating the contract with him when he changed his mind. He let us know the Saturday before the Monday, we were going to vote on the contract, sent us an email, sent us, I guess all of us an email, and basically gave us 2 reasons for deciding to not take the job and stay where he was. The first one was that, he didn't want the select board to settle, for him, and he used settle in quotation marks, and I think we know where that came from. And number 2, Stoughton talked him out of it. So they must like him a lot. And when they got wind of the fact that he was going to do this, they convinced him to not do it. So he has withdrawn from it. So we're basically back to ground zero. So tonight, we need to decide on what the process is to go forward, starting all over. In anticipation of where we might end up tonight, Mr. Purple has talked to Bernie, what's his last name?
Lynch.
Bernie Lynch, yeah. Who I think Sam knows, who is a professional municipal recruiter. So we've got a contract that we could agree to tonight to allow him to basically take this process forward. It's $9,000. He's got it outlined pretty well as far as the steps goes. He's got it outlined kind of 2 parts, 6,000 for one part, 3,000 for the other, and pretty specific about what he's going to do. So with that, Andrew.
Sure, I think I had a question here. If I can. Just overall, I agree with that approach. I think that's what we had talked about all along, is that if the recruitment process, if we ended up in the situation that we're in now, that we would hire Mr. Lynch. And the scope of services, the second bullet is a preparation of a position statement that brings together information about the town, the position. That's just, he's putting together something to like help kind of inform a recruitment ad, something like that. Okay. Just wanted to ask about that, but I am fine with the contract that's in the packet, and hopefully we can hopefully this will result in identifying a successful candidate.
All right,
We need
Sam?
one.
Sam?
Yeah, Mr. Lynch has an exceptional reputation in the state, been around a long time, knows an awful lot of people, and I think is a great entree to understanding sort of who might be looking for positions like this. No guarantee. It's a tough job market out there, certainly for hiring positions like this, but I think he gives us an edge in terms of more direct access. And my theory is that you're better off finding somebody who is actually not looking for a job, who's pretty happy where they are, but looking for maybe a new opportunity to move to a bigger place, or maybe somebody who's looking for a simpler job than they're currently holding to sort of serve out their last 10 years before they retire, kind of thing, who has good experience in the kind of things we're looking for. So I think Mr. Lynch is in a position to have some understanding of those kind of opportunities as well. And I think this is pretty short money for the kind of input that we're likely to get. And it's a very fair price in terms of my understanding of the recruiting market, certainly. So I think this is a good deal, and it gives us, I think, a real leg up in terms of finding another candidate. So I strongly support this.
Chelsea.
Thank you. My question was around the last step of being assistant town administrator in the interview of finalists and selection of a DPW superintendent for presentation to the select board. Can we take it a step further and have it be that we have a signed contract? Or upon starting? I just want to protect I mean, with this job market.
Yep.
You know, I don't want to get to step 9, which is kind of where we got to, and pay them, and then we don't have any.
Good point. What do you think, Mark?
I believe they would be happy to provide that service as well through the negotiation process for a contract. So is that what?
No,
What?
She
no,
wants a contract
no.
signed.
no,
Me too.
I don't want to pay them and not have anybody in the seat.
Understood.
I'm not sure that works, though. I mean, it would be great. On the other hand, for this kind of fee, I don't think, I wouldn't guarantee that you get a final contract for this kind of money.
I agree, it's a great fee. So I paid 25% last year for two people,
Yeah,
first year salary.
I-
So that would be what,
I paid a
Karen's
third.
24,000?
Yeah, I paid a third, so.
Well, I got a discount because I did two.
Yeah.
So they did 25 and we begged for that. So.
So is that,
it a
is
good
this,
fee.
is this price because it doesn't include that?
I can ask what the price would be if there was a guarantee that
Mhm.
the successful candidate would be carried through to
Or,
contract.
or more proactively, does this include, could this include that? Yeah.
Semantics, understood, yes,
So-
yeah.
Let me see what he says, right?
What he says, it doesn't hurt to ask. but
Sure.
I guess I certainly wouldn't do it, but maybe he will.
No, it's-
I just think we need some guarantee.
That would be great.
If
yeah.
this was round one, I may not have thought of that, but you know,
Yeah, I don't know.
They could
well, you
also
didn't
quit
sit
a
there,
month later
you didn't
too, and we're
sit
still
there.
back.
Yeah, but you didn't sit there and
Doesn't
try to
hurt to-
negotiate.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
So you'll check,
I will check.
but we're in favor of doing this.
Do we need to vote on this or?
Yeah, we should vote on hiring Bernie. Liddy
Proceeding,
to
yeah.
find us
So
a
what if
candidate.
it's more to have I think this is the right approach. I'm just,
Yep.
you know,
Well, we have a meeting coming up in 1 week.
Yeah, So we
Yeah.
can wait, so you won't get the answer, then we'll
Sure.
officially vote on hiring Bernie Lynch
Okay.
next Tuesday.
sounds good. Thanks.
So if you wanted, one other thought, if you wanted to vote contingent on that being included.
Okay.
Therefore, if it is, we can move.
Yeah.
If not,
Okay.
we can bring it back and the board can understand that at the next meeting. I'm just
Good.
thinking time frame now. I love just a comfort level piece. Have had conversations with Mr. Al-Khatib, who is currently acting
Yeah.
as interim. You know, he's happy to stay on as we need him. He does have, you know, a vacation scheduled of a week some point during the month of March. That's fine. He's only paid for the time he's here. I'm not paying for his vacation. So, so that is somewhat of a comfort level that we have that in place.
Good.
Like I said, so that's one piece that we're not gonna have to worry about. So let me check with Mr. Lynch as to is that piece inherently included? And if so, can we expressly put that in here?
But we've not posted the job again on any. of this,
We've not,
so-
we've not posted the job yet, no.
Okay,
No.
So we're gonna wait to officially find out what he says? Are we going to go ahead and vote contingent, that we're okay with this contingent on him adding the next step in, taking us through?
That's your call.
Included in the 9,000.
yeah,
If it's included in the 9,000, then I think we
get-
can vote on it.
he gets paid if we have a signed agreement with Canada.
But you, I thought you were saying bye to us. I thought you were waving bye. Do you want to talk?
Can you come up to
Come
the
come
microphone
over
over
here,
here?
tell us, introduce yourself.
In negotiating this contract with this gentleman, would it be possible to put in the contract that he has to provide at least two candidates? Would he agree to that, maybe? You know, you're worried about not getting anybody, but
Yeah.
part of the contract, he's got to agree to
Yeah.
provide two people that you could look at.
I'm not sure
I-
he would take this
yeah,
contract. I mean, this is a tough job market right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
He's a very reputable
Yeah.
recruiter out there.
Yeah.
And I think if we put too many constraints on it, he will say, you know, I don't need this for $9,000. I
Yeah.
spend my time elsewhere.
Oh.
So,
It wouldn't hurt to ask him.
yeah, I guess,
I mean, the contract as listed does speak to finalists with an S,
yeah,
so that would seem to indicate more than one.
I guess my bias is
Fine.
not to push the point, I guess. So thank you, John, but I don't think that's
Okay, so
helpful here.
we just want to wait to vote next Tuesday when we get the question answered, right?
Okay,
So,
fine.
If it was going to be 2 weeks, we'd probably go ahead, but it's
Sure.
only a week.
Sure.
Okay. All right, I think that's it. Any more public comment tonight? If this public comment is for something not on the.
Yes, I know it is, and it's not on the agenda item. It's about how this project might end up. What's best for the taxpayer here is quite clear to me. There should be absolutely no more spending on this project whatsoever, including to town council whatsoever. The project should be cancelled outright and stop spending anything in the future. St. Mark's started this by asking for a free parking lot. I know that today because I found out about it. They started this proposal. That's why the road was kicked south. That's why the trees were cut. That's why the parking lot is so big up north. I think the town's position, let me finish.
Talking about something again that's on the agenda.
No, it's not.
Something else you-
No, it's not. I'm not talking about the MOU. I'm talking what can happen after the MOU. On what I think, if,
Project was on the agenda.
let me finish, please.
And we're not going to let you finish.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
asking
not
you-
talking about the MOU.
the
I'm
park
talking
was
about,
Also on the agenda, we had two separate items. The park was. on
I'm
the
not
agenda.
talking about the park. I'm talking about the entire project. I think the town's position to be not that asking the town should spend money cleaning up the mess. St. Mark's should clean up the mess. They asked for this. We spent $500,000 up there unnecessarily, essentially for St. Mark's. What the negotiation should be is St. Mark's, give us back the 500,000 we spent uselessly for your parking lot. That's what the town's position should be. Give us back the 500,000. Then we'll talk, not the town going in there and spending our money re-landscaping it. It's their lot, their land. They asked for it. It's a futile project. It's not needed. It should be cancelled outright. We should give the 290,000 back to the state where it belongs and pay for our sins. And they are sins. This project is corrupt. From day one, it should be stopped. Thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in